Hello, Brian. Look
Hello,
at that.
Elon.
We're back on another live show, just the two of us. It feels like it's been forever.
I've been wanting some alone time with you, and I'm happy to finally have it.
Okay, so before we start, definitely there. You were very quiet because I think you're like away from your microphone.
Yeah, I'm here. Are we on? Are we recording yet?
We're recording. This is the live show. People are in the chat room. They're watching us. This is an official live recording of Keeping Karlsson, episode 200.
Wow.
All right, so
we 200 episodes. Remember we said when we got to 200, we would abruptly end the podcast?
I don't recall that. Well, like at the start of 200 or at the end of 200?
At our 200th episode.
So should we not do this one?
No, we just need to abruptly never release another episode to follow through on that.
Okay, I don't recall this joke.
We never said
it. Yeah. I guess it was a class. I should have assumed you were going to make a joke like that, though. That doesn't make something. All right, so are you ready for me to start the show?
Yeah, the ADPs on Yahoo, Peter, like there's none past 180.
I know. That's because probably those people don't get drafted in most leagues.
So did you include those guys?
Some of them.
Boom.
Don't worry. All right. So you're good.
You're a real good list now.
You're like sort of moving, like you have a good spot, right? About where you're going to be talking from?
No.
Okay, can I start? Like, I don't understand this.
I'm ready when you are.
Okay, so mute yourself. I'm going to start. Yes! Oh no, I hit the thing as I went down.
You have to do it again.
Hi, everyone in the chat room, by the way. Did I say hi? Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Let me open up my Red Bull here.
So nice to see you all.
I'm tired. I haven't been able to sleep since Karlsson got traded.
It's been a hard life.
Actually, I don't care at all. I'm very happy. All right. Welcome, everybody, to episode 200 of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the best fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who own Erik Karlsson in their keeper pools. The best. The best fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who own Erik Karlsson in their keeper pools. I'm your host, Elon Dubrovsky, and with me, as per usual, as we transition into the preseason series, is my best friend and co-host, Brian Com.
Wow. Hi, Elon. I love it when you call me that. I don't know which title I appreciate more, best friend or co-host. Best co-host would be a nice amalgamation of the two. Best co-host friend. You're my best co-host friend. It's nice to see you. This is my happy voice.
Yeah, well, so this has been a bit of a ride over the past few weeks and months. We did the Almanac, right? We did episodes all the time. Then we released a couple of episodes that were just from the Almanacs. We didn't have to record a show. Then we did that interview with Daniel Negreanu. Then we did that interview with Dom Lucian. And now here we are, finally, just you and I recording a regular episode. And what a fun coincidence that episode 200 is the episode where Erik Karlsson gets traded. Oh my God.
Like you tweeted that. Why is that a funny coincidence?
Episode 200. It's like a milestone episode.
I don't know. If it was like a multiple of 65, I'd say that's a funny coincidence.
I feel like episode 200 is a big deal. I'm very excited about it. If you don't care, then fine. I'll just move on. I don't know why you have to like poo-poo my excitement here.
Maybe there's some numerology buff out there listening who can make a connection between 200 and Erik Karlsson getting traded away. I get it, Elon. You're very good. Good connection between a milestone number and a milestone event.
You know, we've gotten emails of people who don't like it when you're poo-pooing me for no reason. I think you think it's very funny. I don't know. I feel like most people consider the 100th, 200th, etc. Like when it's 2000 and 200, the year 2200, I think people are going to celebrate and be like, wow, what an interesting year. Anyhow, Erik Karlsson got traded, and you and I are here to talk about it on our podcast. Of course, this is not a Sens podcast. A lot of people were asking us, oh, now that Erik Karlsson is not on the Senators anymore, do you have to change the name of your podcast? We made this AMA on Reddit, and like, you know, it was like, oh, ask questions to the hosts of the Keeping Karlsson podcast. And the next day happened to be the day that Erik Karlsson got traded, and people are like, oof, that was bad timing. Like, no, it wasn't. It was fine.
It was great timing. We're more relevant than ever.
Yeah. But of course, let's talk about this trade. I feel like half this episode is going to be us just breaking down the Erik Karlsson trade. And then we're also going to go into some Yahoo ADPs like we like to do every year and say which players we think are getting drafted a little too late or a little too early. Before we get into all of that, of course, we have to mention that we are presented by DobberHockey.com. It's the top fantasy hockey website out there. You have to be going there like every day right now as you're prepping for your drafts. First of all, they have their own guide that you could download, and they update it all the time. They have articles every day, like when Erik Karlsson got traded. There's been so many articles breaking down the trade, different people's opinions, which players benefit, which players don't. It's just a really great site. Plus, as you get into the season, you're going to have all your tools at Frozen Tools. So very useful tool, dobberhockey.com. Check it out. Brian, let's get into this. So the Ottawa Senators traded Erik Karlsson to the San Jose Sharks along with Francis Perron for, I'm going to throw you some names here, Brian. Let's see how many of them our listeners have heard of. So Josh Norris, Chris Tierney, Rudolph Balkers, Dylan DeMello, and then some picks. They had like a mix of first and second round picks with different conditions, like Karlsson has to re-sign, or if Karlsson starts the next season in the Eastern Conference, then the pick gets higher, which is like, what's with the Sens obsession with like if the player goes to the Eastern Conference or the Western Conference? Like, hello, newsflash, you're not going to be a good team for a little while. It doesn't matter if you're competition. Anyway, whatever. There's also conditions like if the Sharks make the playoffs or not, if the Sharks make the conference finals or not. In the end, they got some picks and they got a big slew of players. This was under a week after the Habs sent their pending unrestricted free agent in a year, Max Pacioretty, to the Vegas Golden Knights for a high pedigree prospect, Nick Suzuki, Thomas Tatar, and a second round pick. And when we did this AMA that I was talking about on Reddit/r/hockey the day before the Karlsson trade, one of the questions that we were asked was, what do we think a good return for Karlsson will be? Or what do we think they'll be able to get? And I naively answered that I feel like the Sens should be able to get at least better than what the Habs got for Pacioretty. It's a similar situation, but Erik Karlsson is obviously a tier or two or three above Erik Karlsson, but I don't really know. Like, they got more players. Like, I guess you could say Josh Norris, he was the 19th overall pick in 2017, as opposed to Nick Suzuki, who went 13th. But, you know, that's who the Sharks had, right? I think that's probably one of the Sharks' highest pedigree prospects. Then I would have thought the Sens would get one of the young guys we've been talking about on the Sharks for the past couple of years, guys who get chances in the top six, like a Timo Meier, Kevin LeBanc, maybe like even a Donskoy would be nice. But no, they get Chris Tierney, which I feel is like not that great. These picks, we'll see how they go. Like, the Sharks are looking really good now. I don't know how high these picks are going to be. So, Brian, I know this trade upset you as a Sens fan. You made that very clear from our Twitter account the day it happened. So maybe before we break into the fantasy impact of this trade, which is huge, right? Like, my first thought was like, oh my God, Karlsson and Burns on the same team. What the heck does this mean? But before we get into all of that, why don't you just give all the listeners what I know you're dying to do, a rant about what you think about this trade. I can't imagine you liked it.
I wasn't going to rant, but you invited me. Don't make this sound like I wanted this. I'm getting all wound up for nothing. First off, I think it's Rudolph Balkers, for what that's worth. And you said, oh, I'm sure Josh Norris is one of the Sharks' top prospects. No, he's not ranked their top prospect or their second best prospect. He's ranked, like, Balkers and Norris were apparently consensus third and fourth best prospects in San Jose's system. So there's that. And you said, like, as a Sens fan, I'm upset and I'm offended. As a human being, as a reasonable human being who can think and string two logical thoughts together, I am offended by this trade. And I'm trying to keep myself as hinged as I can, because I have spilled enough frustration over the last few days that you can find on Twitter and the Ask Me Anything, and just my colleagues at work who actually, they wound me up. But anyway, I think the biggest problem I have here with this trade, and it's one I've had with the Ottawa Assets organization for a long time now, is that something doesn't at all pass the sniff test with all the claims that management is making about their efforts to re-sign Karlsson, trade Karlsson, now enter rebuild. I love how much backpatting is happening on their end for saying, hey, we know it's time. It's time to rebuild. We're going to need your patience. We know what's the right thing to do. And so we're going to do the noble thing. We know it hurts us in the short term, and we're going to tear down our team. And they're so proud of themselves, and water carriers everywhere are patting themselves on the back too, saying, oh yeah, good job, Sens. Way to enter that rebuild with class. But there was no plan to go into any rebuild as recently as 10 months ago. How do you trade away a first-round pick as you're entering a rebuild, and then your team is going to be worse than ever and be set up to get such a great asset by being a terrible team, and then use your remaining first rounder that you have for the next 2 years in your rebuild phase? In the first 2 years of your rebuild, in the first 2 years of your rebuild phase, you spend that first rounder on Brady Tkachuk when Philip Zadina was just sitting there and other blue chippers are waiting in 2019. But apparently Brady Tkachuk was just too great a franchise rebuild cornerstone to pass up. And Elon, hot take, I will bet you dollars to donuts that if Zadina was the Canadian and Tkachuk was the Czech, you'd have Zadina being paraded around in a Sens jersey instead. That's me letting you in.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying that this is all just more of a marketing thing than making the best choices for the team?
Yeah, exactly. And not only just marketing choices, but playing to nationalistic tendencies too. This is my read into it, but I feel very confident in this take. And then you make the Karlsson deal. And how do you begin your defense of the Karlsson return? The first things you say in like outside of a formal press conference, you go on Ottawa radio and you say that you got Brady Tkachuk's best friend. Nobody cares. Somebody tell Pierre Dorion that Thomas Chabot's best bud is Connor McDavid and see if we can swing something like that. And now we're just being assaulted with classic lines about building character that always come from the teams who have the least amount of it going around, especially in their front office. The Habs are another team who had recently turned their attention towards building character. The Brian Burke Leafs before them. What do all these teams have in common? They seem to lack it. They seem to lack a plan, and they seem to whip out the word character when they had no other cover left for not having a plan. What should make me think, Ottawa Assets front office, that you're at all a good judge of character? You're run by a disaster of a human being in Eugene Melnyk. You didn't even fire your teenage bus driver harassing assistant general manager. You just temporarily said, we'll wait to see what happens, half defended him, and then let him resign. Your choice of where to involve yourselves in the community in Ottawa is dubious, and you've clearly let petty squabbles with players dictate so much of this ruinous path that you're on. Mike Hoffman was apparently, word was in Ottawa, going around the city, he was a bad character all the time. All of a sudden, they care about it. Trading Dion Phaneuf was rumored to be the consequence of some weird locker room argument with Pierre Dorion. And then, of course, it seems as though the organization has been lying through its teeth to try and frame every single thing that's happened as a W for them, even when they're taking obvious L's. It's like the classic, excuse me, I'm going to get vulgar here for a second, but don't pee in my face and tell me it's raining. That's the cutest way to be vulgar if I'm dropping that line. I'm pausing for you. I'm trying to let you come in. You asked me to.
Yeah. No, you don't need to. Keep going.
Okay.
You're a cutie, Brian. I'm loving this rant. Afterwards, I want to hear an equal, opposite of a rant, complimenting the San Jose Sharks organization to give both teams equal time.
Okay, I don't think that's going to happen. This is and again, this is not even just an Ottawa rant. This is just a hockey sports fandom rant. We've seen this movie so many times before where teams try to squeeze blood from a stone. They say they're competitive when they're not to try and still sell tickets, say they'll spend money when they don't actually. And then when it all comes crashing down, they say they're looking for things like character, commitment, truculence, and it's all just excuse after excuse to cover up incredible amounts of ineptitude, mismanagement, and in this particular case, a near bankrupt egomaniac owner for whom this team is his last vestige of relevance. Aside from owning the Ottawa Senators, Eugene Melnyk is nothing, and he is essentially nothing. I guess I don't need to be careful about what I say about him. I just had this thought that anyway, Karlsson's not even on the Senators anymore, so we don't need to worry about it. So what I would like, instead of just tearing apart the team, here's a path that they could have taken. They could have just said, well, we kind of blew it. This is what we tried to do. Please trust that this was the best we could do. And this is the plan going forward. They could have started and said, look, we thought we had a shot at contending because we went to double overtime in the conference finals with the eventual cup winner. By the way, they did think they had a shot at contending. That was a big mistake. They really misevaluated their team. Anyway, so they thought that's where they were. So, hey, we went and traded futures for Matt Duchene. And then it turns out we were wrong. That sucks. Something went wrong in our assessment of where our organization was. We're going to try and figure out what happened. And now we've reassessed our situation and we think we're rebuilding. And with hindsight, that first rounder would have been really helpful to have, but we don't have it. And that's the reality because Colorado, Joe Sakic said TT no trade backs after we finished the deal. And so we figured our next best way to get futures, to stock the cupboard and get on this rebuild path was to trade our biggest asset, which could help us load up as best we can on futures. And Erik Karlsson is our biggest asset. And while we would have liked to receive a generational prospect in return, the market on a 28-year-old high-ticket superstar with 1 year left on his contract meant teams weren't ready to part with our first asking price. So we tried to wait it out, get that asking price. Something went wrong along the way. It wasn't happening. So this return is what we've got. And this is why we like this particular return than what we got. And we're going to do the best that we can from here. It might not be as good as anyone was hoping. It might not seem like fair value, but it is the best that we could get on the trade market. But instead, of course, we're hearing Sens management speaking in nonsensical timelines and platitudes that don't align or pass the smell test at all for people who claim to have some idea of what they're doing. And so here we are. Ottawa traded away a generational player who was and could possibly be the best ever in franchise history, but made sure to slowly erode all their leverage throughout the process. And now they have capital S6 assets, none of which project to even have a shot at being a difference maker in the NHL. So, I think I'm done, Elon. Go Karlsson.
I love it,
Karlsson. That's what I've been saying for like 3 years now. Now I can really mean it and not have to cheer for Ottawa at the same time.
Yeah, there you go. We get to move on. I'm very excited. I actually placed a bet, Brian. I know you don't like us talk about gambling on the podcast, but I placed a bet on the San Jose Sharks to win the cup just to solidify that I'm going to be cheering for the Sharks and Erik Karlsson. I'm very excited to see how he's going to be able to do in this new situation. So let's dive into this now. And like I said, my first thought about this new situation for Erik Karlsson on the San Jose Sharks is that the Sharks have Brent Burns, and Burns and Karlsson have been the two highest scoring defensemen in the league over the past 5 seasons. Karlsson is way ahead, 355 points in 394 games over these last 5 seasons. Burns has 278 points in 328 games in that span. So Karlsson's like a 74-point season pace. Burns closer to a 70-point season pace. Brian, you want to try to guess who's third overall in the last 5 seasons of points behind Karlsson and Burns?
Okay, let me take a few guesses. First guess, Letang.
No.
Okay, second guess, Shattenkirk.
You knew that it wasn't Letang because I'm not even talking about point pace right now. I'm just saying who has the most overall points, and Letang's been injured for so much. Shattenkirk, not even close.
Okay, Bufflin.
Honestly, don't overthink it. It's actually an easier answer. Yeah, it's Hedman.
Klingberg?
It's Hedman.
Oh, Hedman. Okay. Well, I was just thinking maybe he only came on too recently, but the last 2 seasons have been really great, and he was consistent before that. Wow, Victor Hedman has been so good for so long.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. Like right now, the top 3 defensemen in fantasy, according to most people, are also the top 3 of the last 5 years. So I guess the past, we'll see if it predicts the future going into next year. Before the trade, it was obvious to most people that Karlsson and Burns were the top D options in fantasy. And it was fun to debate. We've had this debate many times over the summer and over the past year. Like, who should you draft first in a league with these settings or these settings? Karlsson or Burns? Who do you want more? Now that they're on the same team, does this change? Like, are Karlsson and Burns still the top 2 defensemen to own in fantasy? Do they hurt each other's value? Do they help each other's value? Like, I feel like the big thing that jumped to my head right away was, are they both going to be on the top power play? And I was thinking, oh no, what if they like split them into 2 power plays to make them both good? But then I was like, how can you not have Erik Karlsson and Brent Burns both on the power play most of the time, right? So I feel like there's no way they're both not on the top power play. But anyways, what are your answers to these questions? Like, do they help each other or do they hurt each other somewhere in between?
So I think they're still the 2 best fantasy hockey defensemen. I don't know that they're as far ahead of the rest of the pack as they were when they were playing on separate teams. I think they each have lower ceilings being on the same team. My first rough inclination is to knock 5 points off of both their projected totals. And also my first inclination is, that the Sharks will load up the top power play with both of them. However, we also have the possibility, we don't know yet, but there is the possibility that they can run. They have the personnel to do it. 2 reasonably even power play units with Karlsson helming one and Burns helming another.
Okay, sorry. Interesting. Yeah, I guess they could do that. That would make everyone so sad because then that also would hurt the fantasy values of guys like Pavelski and Couture, right? If they're getting less power play time. That's always been the thing with the Sharks is the top power play plays so much and they're all so good. I feel like we've got to just assume that it's going to be Pavelski and Couture and Thornton and Burns and Karlsson until we hear otherwise. And so yeah, you're saying to drop 5 points off of both of them. I'd like to get into that. So how about this? As we go through analyzing this trade, we may as well make live updates to our Almanac spreadsheet. So for those of you who don't know, if this is like your first episode of the show, Brian and I recorded the world's first ever NHL audio almanac where we we recorded this massive audiobook, one chapter per team, where we broke down all the fantasy relevant players. And at the end of each chapter, or as we were going through, we were putting down projections onto a spreadsheet of how many points we thought each player was going to get. So we have this big spreadsheet of projections, and I feel like we have to make a lot of changes because of this one trade. There's so many players, and I'll get to them one at a time, and we'll discuss all the players I think might be affected by this trade. So let's look at it in terms of the raw numbers. We have Erik Karlsson first. We put him down. Each of us put down 75 points. And by the way, these are all paces, so we didn't try to project games played. We were just like, this is how many points we think the player would get if they played all 82 games. So we both put Erik Karlsson down for 75 points, up from his 72-point pace last season. He had 62 points in 71 games last year. Last year was funny. Like, Karlsson led all defensemen in point pace. He barely edged out a couple of guys like Karlsson and Barrie. I'm talking about John Karlsson there. And yet people consider Erik Karlsson to have had a down year. And I feel like it's especially wild that Erik Karlsson was able to lead all defensemen in point pace, even though he had that random 10-game pointless streak that started on November 16th. So if, let's say, even was only like a half point per game guy during that stretch, he would have done even better. But anyways, you could also say maybe you want to take off some points. So whatever. He ended up, like I said, with this really great point pace. Now that we look at him next year on the Sharks, are we going to keep him at 75, or are you going to like lock this in, like you said, and take off 5 points?
Yeah, I'm going to take Karlsson down to 70 points, maybe even high 60s. I'd go even lower if he still were an Erik freaking Karlsson, who will always and forever have point per game upside no matter where he is. But I am concerned that Karlsson is somewhat limited now, because I don't think the Sharks are going to score 80 extra goals with Karlsson in the lineup, which would be one way for him to get a point per game pace. And so let's do some accounting to find where Karlsson's points could come from. Let's take a look to New Jersey for a second to see just how many more goals the Sharks might be able to score with their new superstar. And I do this because the Devils are a really great recent example of a team that had a star player arrive there in his prime, and we can see how that impacted their whole team goal totals to get a sense of how many extra goals the Sharks might score, which will help give us a sense of how many points might be available for Erik Karlsson next year. Might be available. Is that okay to start from there? Might be available for Erik Karlsson this season. So Taylor Hall arrived as a New Jersey Devil at the start of 2016-17, and their goal totals actually stayed even that year compared to the year before he arrived. In 2017-18, though, the Devils scored 243 goals after 3 straight years where they'd had about 180 goals as a team. That's 60 more goals. They did have a higher team shooting percentage in all situations, but they also had higher shot rates. And the Devils had a lot of room to grow 60 goals because they had the league worst shot attempt rates for a couple years running heading into Taylor Hall's beginning with them and including his first season with them. But the San Jose Sharks don't really have that room to grow. They're already a top 5 team in shot attempts per 60 minutes at all strengths in each of the last couple years, and a top 6 team in expected goals for per 60 minutes. So how much more can San Jose actually grow their goal scoring totals? And what I'm suggesting here is that there's not a ton of room for them to add offense to their lineup. Like, there is a finite number of points available for Sharks players to get in on. So even if I want to be generous and say the Sharks managed to get another 30 goals and that those goals turn into Karlsson points, there are still another 40 points that we need to do some accounting for if we want to say that Erik Karlsson is a 70-point player. Say, to keep it simple, you take 5 points each away from Hertl, LeBanc, Burns, Meyer, Pavelski, Thornton, and Evander Kane. There are 35 points right there that Erik Karlsson can steal away. Another angle to try and take here is, well, when's the last time an NHL team had 2 defensemen who were this capable offensively, like Burns and Karlsson, and how'd those guys do? And to do that, I'm looking at the 2006-2007 Stanley Cup winning Anaheim Ducks, who had Scott Niedermayer and Chris Pronger combining for 128 points, exactly half of which came on the power play. Niedermayer had 69 points on the season. Pronger had 59 points. They both played 27 minutes a night. So that was 1 year before the behind the net stats keeping era began. And my memory isn't good enough to quite remember how they split those minutes at even strength and on the power play. But I'm kind of wondering if that's still the general split we're looking at here. Same number of minutes, 70 points, 60 points. Keep in mind the Ducks scored 254 goals that year, which is 7 more than the Sharks did in 2017-18. So even that goal scoring total, the amount of goals that both guys could get in on, seems like it could be reasonably similar for the Sharks in 2018-19. It all kind of fits pretty neatly together, doesn't it? Okay, so those are a couple ways to try and figure out exactly why I think Karlsson does not have the ceiling he used to. I hate to underestimate our guy, but I think 65 to 70 points is a pretty comfy range for him now that he's sharing time with a lot of really fantastic Sharks, including Brent Burns.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Brian, the way you're looking at this. Like, everything you're saying seems very logical. You're saying there's only so many points to go around, and any points you want to give to Erik Karlsson, you almost have to like take away from other players unless you assume the Sharks are going to score so many more goals. And you gave some reasons why maybe they won't be able to because they were already scoring so many goals. But that said, like, Erik Karlsson has been able to get 80 points before, and if he gets the same opportunities that he had in Ottawa, I feel like if he plays the same, but he's playing with better players, you'd expect him to get more points. And maybe, yeah, you're just taking a lot of points maybe from a single player. Like, I don't know, like, I feel like there's a lot of players on a team and a lot of goals to go around. So I really like this exercise that you did, but I'm definitely not going to say that this is like conclusive evidence that for sure Erik Karlsson doesn't have the same ceiling. I think it's like a reasonable argument, and I'm down to also downgrade that point projection, but I don't think I want to. I think I'm going to leave him actually at 75 points for me, just because, I don't know, I think he's going to be playing with better players. Like, I think it's amazing that he was able to put up such a high point pace last year. Though, to be fair, it was a 72 point pace last year, and we were projecting 75. So I don't know, somewhere between 70 and 75 sounds good, but I definitely don't think it's out of the question that he can hit 80 again just because he's Erik Karlsson, assuming he's playing on the top power play. But, like, when we talked to Dom last week, I think he brought up a really good point that a lot of projections, you got to consider time on ice, right? The more time you have to play, both at even strength and on the power play, the more opportunities you're going to have to get points. So Erik Karlsson was obviously a very heavily utilized guy in Ottawa, and on San Jose, they not only have Brent Burns, they also have Marc-Edouard Vlasic, who is someone who could eat up a lot of time. Maybe the Sharks don't need to play Karlsson so much. So now I'm kind of talking myself into thinking that I'm going to agree with you. Fine, let's bring him down to 70 points. Still a premier fantasy asset, and man, I'm just really excited to see this team play. Like, I was already so excited to see the Leafs play next year, getting John Tavares. Now I don't know. Like, I just want to see a game Leafs versus Sharks. It's going to be unbelievable.
That will be a lot of fun to watch. And yeah, I don't mean to act as, you know, a chartered accountant doing those numbers. It was a quick and dirty look, but I'm glad you can sort of get with the general sense that, again, the Sharks don't seem like they have a way to score 40 or 50 more goals with Karlsson, which is going to mean the wealth is going to need to be spread around a little bit more, with Karlsson sneaking points away from his various teammates, getting assists when they might have otherwise.
Yeah, like, I could see someone, for example, like Tomas Hertl really getting hurt. We'll get to him in a little bit. We'll get to him in a little bit. But yeah, I could see him getting like the Eric Haula treatment that we've been projecting for him over on Vegas. Okay, let's go now to Brent Burns. So as we discussed with Dom last week, by the way, if you guys didn't listen to our interview last week with Dom Lucian, you got to check it out. That was an amazing episode. Dom is really good. You should also check out his projections. KeepingKarlsson.com/Dom. Super cheap. By the way, the almanac that I was just talking about, you could buy that still. KeepingKarlsson.com/almanac. This is a no ads episode, by the way. No advertisers yet. So it's just us saying things that we want you to check out throughout. I hope you guys are okay with that overall. But yeah, so Brent Burns, like we discussed with Dom last week, we were expecting Burns, like you and I, Brian, were expecting him to bounce back from his down year of 67 points in our almanac. We went in depth into our San Jose chapter about how a lot of his decrease in total points from the previous years was due to a really slow start. Like, he sucked in his first 19 games points wise. He took a bunch of shots, but nothing went in. He had no goals, only 7 assists in 19 games. That's terrible for Brent Burns. But in his final 63 games of the year, he had 60 points. He led all defensemen in points from that point on by a large margin. John Karlsson was the next highest with 51 points in that span. And again, Burns had 60, and then came Ghost Bear with 59. Erik Karlsson had 45, though he played 6 fewer games. Like, Burns tore up the league. If you just take out those first 19 games, and Dom said in our interview from that what he's learned is you can't throw things out unless you're talking about Crosby when he's playing under Mike Johnston. But still, like, I feel like we saw that Brent Burns is still capable of being an elite guy, and I don't just look at his 67 points from last year and go, okay, I guess he's not like a 70-plus point guy anymore. Again, he, just like Karlsson, is someone that in my mind can be very close to a point per game guy. Of course, he is a year older, and of course, he did have that slow stretch, and you can't ignore it. Like, it is possible for him to go slow, as we saw just last year. So now going into next year, I had Brent Burns for 75 before Erik Karlsson came to town. You actually had Burns at 70. So now at this point, are you going to make any changes? Like you said, take 5 points off of both. So are you going to move Burns down from 70 to 65?
I am. I'm also taking Burns down about 5 points. I suggested in our almanac, with 285 skaters projected and 65 goalies tiered over 27 plus hours of content. Anyway, in there, I did say that I had my usual faith in Brent Burns to keep up his fantastic as always numbers. Like you said, Elon, Burns' early season slump was really just bad luck. I mentioned this in the almanac and last week on Dom's guest episode, but it took Burns 84 shots on goal before he finally played in the game, almost 2 months into the season, in which he scored one, which is not characteristic of him or his shooting percentage, and wasn't for the rest of the way. And when we did see some decline in Brent Burns' shooting and scoring rate stats, it wasn't alarming to the point that I was knocking a lot off my projection because of concerns with him entering his age 33 season. Rather, I dinged him more in upside, mentioning that instead of hoping for Burns to top out at 75 points, I was falling down towards like the number 70 as his upside, with my actual projection settling in around the mid to high 60s. But now with Erik Karlsson in the picture, I'm going to adjust to take Brent Burns down into the low to mid 60s. One thing I'm really curious about, though, is how Erik Karlsson affects Brent Burns' shot-taking habits, because that's a really big reason of why you want to draft Brent Burns, because he can pop 300 shots on goal, no problem. I'm especially curious about how this works on the power play, where Brent Burns does get a lot of his shots on goal. Last season, Burns didn't quite roam the blue line as much. He either shot from the right-hand side of the blue line, or he helped to create shots from Couture's position in the left side face-off circle, and also helping create shots from the net front position as well. So with Erik Karlsson to help on the blue line, I almost wonder if Brent Burns moves to that left side face-off circle spot himself to bang home setups from Erik Karlsson and company, and how much that really affects his shot totals on the whole. I think there's equal chance that Brent Burns maintains or sees some measure of I think there's about equal chance that Brent Burns maintains or sees a little bit of decline in his shot on goal numbers. I will say it's not going to be, in my opinion at least, a crushing drop in shots on goal. So just worry a bit more about losing a handful of points more than anything. Handful of points, handful of shots, but I still expect Brent Burns to be able to mostly do what he's done for the last several years.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, it's just so hard to like project this. I guess what you're saying makes some sense. Also, Erik Karlsson used to be a really high shot taker. That kind of went down a little bit, but yeah, maybe it's Karlsson whose shots on goals go down and Burns stay the same. And maybe, I don't know, maybe Burns' shots have a better chance of going in because he's getting sweet passes from Erik Karlsson to put him in a better spot. Like at my naive view, not really knowing power play setups as well as you do, was that you'd sort of have like Joe Thornton, Erik Karlsson, like passing it to Brent Burns at the point somehow. And then Burns takes his shot. And then you've got the other couple guys, like let's say Pavelski, Couture, or whoever, are just going to try to get in the rebounds and sort of set it up that way. But I don't know. Does that make sense?
Well, no, I was saying maybe Brent Burns sets up like Ovi does. So this would actually help Brent Burns' goal totals if he's the guy taking like the Sharks power play while Brent Burns was on the ice really worked primarily from that left face-off circle and the front of the net. So the front of the net, a lot of those might have been rebounds or deflections off point shots. And then the shots from the face-off circle, there was a lot of movement to get the puck to that position. And Brent Burns might be the best shooter on the Sharks from that position, even though it's never been his spot to play on the power play. Now he has a chance to maybe go ahead and play it. I'd be very interested to see if that worked out.
Okay. I mean, by the way, Brian, I did hear you the first time. I was suggesting an alternate way of how the power play could be ran.
Yes, there's so many ways. That's the difficulty. And we're going to, like, as we continue talking about the Sharks, this is a weird situation. It's not just that we have Brent Burns and Erik Karlsson on the same team and we're trying to figure out their power play setup like we are every other team in the league, but it's just so rare for a team to have two defensemen of this calendar. Oh my God. to have two defensemen of this caliber that there's no real precedent for us to look at and see, well, this is how Team X did it, and it worked pretty well for them, so that might be a model to follow. We are breaking ground here that we at least have not seen broken for 11 years, since 2006.
Okay, so I think, so you said you're bringing Burns down. You had him at, what was it, 70 points, I think, last year? What did I say? No, you had him at 65, I believe.
Sorry, last year?
Sorry, let me say it again. I just don't remember now.
What
you projected Burns for in the almanac? Because I'm like updating this as we go. You had him for 65. Oh no, you've already changed it.
I changed it. It's in the change log.
Okay. All right, so to summarize here, we had Brent Burns. I had him at 75 points, and you had him at 70 points when we recorded our almanac. You said you're taking off 5, so you're putting down for 65, and then I have to decide whether I'm going to keep him at 75. I'm at least going to move him down to 70, so I'll do that. Burns down to 70. Done. I guess I'm with you. What a bummer.
Oh, you want me to respond?
No, just thinking. It's like a great situation for the Sharks, but kind of a bummer that now all the players that we're talking about are getting hurt in their fantasy value. I wonder if there's going to be anyone on the Sharks who we say gets more points. You've got to think if you're playing with Erik Karlsson, you're going to get more points, right? So let's talk about some of these other players. Like there is this top power play. And again, I think we're going to have to talk a negative here because back in the San Jose chapter, we discussed how Evander Kane seemed like he'd be the obvious person to take the fourth forward spot on the top power play along with Thornton, Couture, and Pavelski. Though we did point out that Evander Kane was actually bumped from that top power play in the playoffs. The Sharks were going Couture, Pavelski, Hurdle, LeBanc, and Burns. And by the way, Hurdle was there ever since Joe Thornton got injured. So now with Erik Karlsson coming, especially if he's going to be on that top power play, now I feel like Evander Kane has like almost no shot of getting on the top power play. There was already concerns he wouldn't be able to get there even before. Now I feel like he's for sure getting bumped. So should that mean that we reduce Evander Kane's projection for next year? We both put him at 60, or maybe the fact that he gets bumped off the top power play will be, what's the word for it's like made up for? What's a good word? You know good words, Brian, you're a teacher.
What's the word you're looking for?
Like when you have something bad happens and you have something else good happen to like make up for it.
Bittersweet?
No, the word.
That's a word.
That's 2 words. All right.
No.
That's an idiom.
It's a compound word.
I meant there's an actual English word that gets us across without anyway, don't worry about it.
It's also not an
compensate. Ryan did it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. You can be a teacher now.
Okay. What was I saying? Sorry, everyone. So with Burns off the power play, does that mean we should reduce his projection where we both put him at 60? Or maybe... now I forget the whole thing. Okay, sorry, guys. I'm just going to repeat this. So I feel like now Evander Kane has a super low shot of getting on the top power play with Erik Karlsson in the picture, considering he was maybe not even a guarantee to get there before. So should that mean that we reduce his projection? We both put him at 60 last year, or maybe even though he loses that top power play time, maybe it's compensated by the fact that he's playing at even strength with Erik Karlsson. So maybe he's going to have more even strength points and it's going to balance out in the end and we should keep him at 60.
Yeah, well, it certainly helps that Evander Kane and most Sharks are now going to be playing the majority of their time with either Burns or Karlsson at even strength. And those defensemen, of course, can advance the puck out of their own zone, set up offensive opportunities like few others, or perhaps like no others in the league. But it certainly does hurt Evander Kane that his chances to show up on a loaded top power play unit are zilch now, or at least they seem like zilch if that's the route the Sharks go in loading up their top unit. Of course, things work out fine for him if San Jose wants to run 2 units, one each with Karlsson and Burns. Here's a fun Evander Kane fact, though, for anyone getting too concerned. Evander Kane's career high power play points total is 10. He's never scored more than 10 power play points in a season, and that happened all the way back in 2011-2012. That was the first year that the Jets played in Winnipeg again after moving from Atlanta. So I think it's still like you're just fine. So you're still just fine hoping for mid-50s from Evander Kane with a great supporting cast, but not guaranteed top power play deployment. And that's where I'm putting him. So I was hoping for 60 with occasional turns on the top power play. Now I'm not really going to be relying on those. And I'm not going to be counting on him to relying on him to break his career high 57 points.
Oh, you're going below 57. I still like the fact that he's probably going to be on the top line and he's going to be playing with now Erik Karlsson or Brent Burns all the time at even strength. I'm good to leave him at 60 points. I'm excited for Evander Kane next year. I still think he looks good. And I feel like when we came up with this projection, we already thought that he maybe wouldn't get so much power play times considering he was already getting bumped in the playoffs. But it looks like we're pretty close. Like I'm saying 60, you're saying 57. So why am I even quibbling with you? You're the one that likes to go to the nitty gritty. I like to just do multiples of 5. Right, maybe we could have this discussion right now on the show. Like I kind of feel like
I'm not having it now. I'm so over this conversation.
I just want to say my opinion to the listeners.
I don't mean to cut you off. We've argued about this so much. You think that we should give all our projections in multiples of 5, and I like the nuance that you can offer by not providing your projections in multiples of 5.
Yeah, so I understand why you would say that. And I guess my point, because I know maybe you're making it seem like it sounds dumb, that like, why would you not want to have more nuance? I feel like it's almost like a little, and not to say you are, but I feel like it feels like a bit of an arrogant exercise to try to like really pinpoint it down to a specific number of points. Like, oh, like I'm so smart. I'm thinking of it so cleverly that I actually don't think he's going to get 58 points. I think he's going to get 57 points. Like, obviously we don't know. Like
that's not what I'm doing though.
Let me finish the point.
You're misinterpreting my specificity with arrogance. I have no idea what these guys are going to do next year, but to me, there's a difference between 55 plus or 55 tops, and that's what I use the little nuance on either side of 55 to help illustrate.
Okay, I see. Like to me, I understand what you're saying. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. To me, I feel like it's helpful to just be like, is this a 55-point guy? Is this a 60-point guy? Is this a 65-point guy? And that's sort of like we're grouping these people into what we think they are. You want to add a little more, like you say, nuance, but I think you kind of lose something there. But it doesn't matter. Either way, we're gonna move forward, and you could project your way. I'll project my way.
Would you prefer every other projector? Like, put your own aside for a second. Would you prefer Scott Cullen, Dom, Dauber, all the projectors only release their projections in multiples of 5?
Actually, that's a really good question. So here's my answer to that. Dom, his projections are generated 100% by a model. So he doesn't even go in and like he goes in and like tries to predict how much like ice time the player will get and things like that. But then his model like spits out a number and that's what's there. So obviously there, I don't want him to like round the number that was like calculated by his model. So no, but someone like Scott Cullen, like I don't know exactly what he's doing, but I think if anyone's like, you know, just looking at stuff and then coming up with it off the top of their head, then yeah, I think I would appreciate if they just give me, you know, multiple of 5. Like I don't need you to tell me that I think this guy's a 57-point guy and this guy's a 58-point guy. Like to me, that's it's okay.
Okay, so I would like to hear from the listeners on this one. I would like to know, give us a hashtag team rounded or team specific for those catchy enough hashtags to let us know what you think. Is it silly? Is it a fool's errand to try and predict the spaces between multiples of 5? Again, for me, there's a big difference between 58 points and 56 points.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's silly to say that.
Well, like 54 or 57 points and 54 points.
Sure. Like, I feel like it's very similar. Like, I feel like that's one game here or there. Like, I know you're trying to get across more information by saying 54, 57, but in the end, it all gets kind of washed out to me, where it's just like what do you think about this guy? But anyways, okay, let's move on. I didn't mean for it to be an argument, just an interesting discussion.
The blessing we have from creating our projections this season is that you insisted that all of my projections turned it into a rounded number. So at the end of the season, we can see which projection set of mine was closer to being accurate, whether it was my rounded set or my specific set.
Sounds good.
If it was my specific set, would that justify using specific numbers?
Brian, if we've learned anything from making the show is sample sizes of 1 don't justify anything. That's almost like why I should say this, like, how did the...
What do you mean sample sizes of 1? What's like, the one sample size?
1 season worth of data that your specific beat out average. It's only 1 season. It's just like how the New Jersey Devils only scored 60 more goals. And so how much, like, obviously it was an interesting road that you took us on, but like, and you ended up saying how it was a different situation because the Devils had so many more goals to make up for because they were doing so poorly before. But if you would have said like, oh, that means that San Jose is going to do this, I would have been like, well, I mean, that's only 1 team. Anyways, I'm just having fun. I hope it's okay, Brian. And we're going to talk about goalies later on, and we're going to have some disagreements again, but I hope we could keep it as cordial as we've done here. No arguments.
I hope you will still call me your best friend and co-host at the end of this episode.
I have no interest in arguing with you. I just want to talk about more San Jose Sharks players. So you're moving Evander Kane down to 55 points. I'm going to keep him at 60 points. Okay, next, I think that... Oh, I lost my spot. Damn. Where was I? Okay. Yes. Okay. I'm keeping Evander Kane at 60 points. You're bumping him down to 55. The next player I want to talk about is Tomas Hertl. So Michael Clifford pointed out on his Dauber Hockey Fantasy Impact article that with Chris Tierney gone, the Sharks have an open third line center spot, which I totally like. That totally went over my head. I'm really glad I read that article. Great stuff over at Dauber Hockey. And I really like Michael Clifford, actually. His articles are always really good. And yeah, so the Tierney was the third line center on San Jose. With him gone, he suspected that the prime candidate to get that spot is Tomas Hertl, who was previously playing second line wing with Couture, but he can also play center, and he's probably the best option now to play third line center. And if Hertl gets this treatment, that we, by the way, also we're expecting Eric Haula to get in Vegas. Like they brought Stasny in, and now Haula gets bumped from the second line to the third line. So should we expect that Hertl's not going to be able to get that many points next year? Like obviously he's not going to get on the top power play. We just talked about how we don't think Evander Kane's going to get there. So I imagine Hertl won't get there either. Though it is worth pointing out that Joe Thornton is not exactly someone that we should depend on to be 100% healthy all year long. So maybe there will be an open spot for Kane and Hertl and LeBanc to fight over throughout the season. But anyways, we're assuming at least to start the year, Hertl's not going to be on the top power play. And if he's in the bottom six, I feel like we have to downgrade. We both put him at 50 points for last year, which maybe was kind of low because considering a lot of people expect him to have some upside. But now I don't even feel comfortable projecting him for 50. Like I personally wouldn't be drafting Tomas Hertl. I'll let someone else draft him because he's actually still getting drafted reasonably high in drafts. But I think that's based on him being a second line winger and top power play guy like he was last year for most of the season.
Yeah, Hertl was kind of a low-key favorite before this trade happened because he was rumored to potentially be someone who could set up net front on the power play. And that's why we liked Tomas Hertl for 50 points, despite having him seen him no better than a 45-point player over the last 3 years. And now in Hertl's age 25 season, he's about smack in the midst of his prime. So I'm not sure we're going to see any huge steps forward, which is why we still limited ourselves to 50 points. But 45, I think, is still the expectation here. If he does take a small step forward and keep playing as though he's in his prime years, let's say he does play third line center, end up net front on a power play 1A or power play 1B unit. And that's a mix, like third line center and on a split. And that's a mix of a scenario, right? You've got your best case on the power play where they are. And that's a mix of scenarios right there where he gets 45 points, where he gets the best case on the power play because there's 2 even power plays for him to play on. And then at even strength, he plays at third line center, which is the worst case scenario. I think it's still more likely, though, that Tomas Hertl plays second line center. The Sharks are deep, but I don't know if they've got quite the right depth to roll a top 9 where Tomas Hertl is worth more working to drive a third line than he is complementing players on the second line. So that role as second line center is what I'm still expecting. And then on a second power play unit or occasionally a power play 1A or B unit, I'll still keep him right around the mid-40s at 45 points at the end of the day. And I'm with you. I'm not getting too excited about him. He's not about to be, oh my gosh, famous last words here. I'm feeling it right now. We can rewind to this tape this time next year after he scored 80 points. He's not about to be a breakout player. A lot of people have this misconception that just because a player's right in the middle of his prime, that's when he's going to break out. And of course, the aging curve shows us that hockey players' primes can start around the age of 22, and then they start tapering off around the age of 27. But it's still like an incremental rise. You're not suddenly, even, and then pow, right when you're smack in the middle of your prime, you are crushing it to extents that no one has ever seen before. The last 2 seasons of what Tomas Hertl has given us are clues to what he's going to be able to do at the peak of his play. And those clues just lead us to a conclusion of 45 points. That's a lot of words for a very boring projection.
Yeah, Brian. So, okay, a couple of things there. First of all, you kept on saying how you think Tomas Hertl will stay a second line center. He was never second line center. It was Logan Couture as second line center. Hertl was on the wing.
Sorry, I meant like hang on to a role where he might still be a second line center. You're right. I was looking at some at some line projections, and the set I was looking at, I'm going to bring them up right now, had Hertl centering Pavelski and Couture on line 2, and Thornton centering Evander Kane and Timo Meier on line 1, which is weird, right? Yeah. I guess you could switch Pavelski and Meier and Hertl still in the middle or playing wing with Couture. I still see him as a second liner, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, like I don't know though, Brian. Like I feel like the Sharks actually are deeper than you want to give them credit for because I think the more standard expectations based on what they've done in previous years is you're gonna have the Joes together on line one, Pavelski and Thornton, and say throw Evander Kane there. Then you could have a second line where Logan Couture plays with, say, LeBanc and Timo Meier. Like they have enough top six guys. I don't know if Hertl is so much better than guys like LeBanc and Meier. And actually, Meier is the next one I want to talk about because if Tomas Hertl falls to center the third line, which you're saying you don't think is going to happen, but Michael Clifford thinks it might happen. So who knows? But maybe Timo Meier is the one who finally gets a spot in the top six, takes over that spot since he's a winger, and he's the one who plays with Couture. And I actually really like Timo Meier. He only had 36 points in 81 games last season, but you can't ignore his 210 shots on goal, playing less than 15 minutes average time on ice per game. It reminds me a lot of Victor Arvidsson's numbers in 15-16 before he broke out for 61 points the next season. Arvidsson was taking a ton of shots in low ice time, and so he didn't have the opportunity to do a lot. But then the next year when he finally got a good opportunity, he really broke out. And I'm not saying Timo Meier is Victor Arvidsson, but if Meier could get into the top six, which I think there is a reasonable expectation that it could happen now, especially if Hertl moves down, then I feel like if Meier could get maybe more like 17 minutes per game, 16 or 17 as opposed to 15 with all those shots on goal, you're going to get a lot more going in. And I don't know, I like him as a good sleeper for next year. I'd prefer to draft Timo Meier than Tomas Hertl. I'm curious to know who you would prefer to draft in most leagues. Last year, I put Meier down for 50. Last year, why did I say that? I'm curious to see who you would draft first between Meier and Hertl in fantasy for next season. So in our almanac, I put Meier down for 50 points. You put him down for 45. But now with a reasonable path to get that extra ice time, I feel like he could end up being a really great sleeper. Like, I don't know how much higher than 50 I would put him. I'd like to put him at 55, but maybe that's crazy. Maybe I was already reaching by putting him at 50 when last year he only had 36 points.
Yeah. I don't want to start with yeah.
That's your favorite. You have to do two yeahs. That's your classic.
No, that's when I'm really buying time, which is what I was doing with Dom. Okay. Timo Meier is a more exciting pick than Tomas Hertl. You have a lower floor, but I think you get a higher ceiling to go along with that. So it depends on your flavor of drafting. One amazing thing about Meier that you hinted at, Elon, Meier is a top 20 guy in shots on goal and shot attempts per 60 minutes, which is nice. Let me try that again. I'm going to start over. Timo Meier is a more exciting pick than Tomas Hertl. I'm with you there. He does have a
Sorry, you had an internet glitch there. Can you start that over?
Can't wait to. Okay. Timo Meier is a more exciting option in fantasy and life than Tomas Hertl. I don't know about life. I don't know their personalities. But in fantasy, Timo Meier certainly has the upside. Of course, it's at the cost of a lower floor, but I think his ceiling goes higher than Tomas Hertl's. And one reason I think that is because in 2017-18, Timo Meier, and you hinted at this already, Elon, he was a top 20 guy in shots on goal per 60 minutes and shot attempts per 60 minutes. And that's what you got at by saying how many shots he had in how few minutes he had. It translated very nicely. So if he is getting more minutes, then hopefully he'll just keep shooting away. And Meier does seem like he could stick in a more well-rounded top six in San Jose, meaning he'd probably have two very good line mates between Kane, Couture, Pavelski, and Thornton. He'll get two of those if he does manage to hang out in the top six. And I think, yeah, I'll just say it again for effect, Meier has more upside than Hertl, should he be able to hold that kind of spot down. And as someone who we weren't going to expect to see on the top power play anyway, Meier really only stands to gain should the Sharks deploy two even-handed power play units. So I'm going to keep Meier where I had him in our projections in the high 40s, but with enough shots on goal that I do prefer him to Hertl. Even if they end up with the same points totals, Meier's value is better thanks to all those shots he's been firing on net.
Shots. Timo Meier. He's good. I like him. He's one of my sleepers for next year. Okay. Brian, any other skaters on the Sharks that you think we should talk about? Like, first of all, we've got guys like Pavelski, Couture, Thornton. You said before, I think when you were getting into Erik Karlsson, that you want to maybe take some points off of all of them in order to like allocate your points to Erik Karlsson that he so likely deserves. You're like, okay, sorry, Pavelski, Couture, each of you need to give away 5 points. Erik needs his points. He's new here. Everyone be nice to Erik. He's new here. Give him some points. So yeah, are you gonna like, so are you going to expect any other of your Sharks projections to change with Karlsson in the picture, aside from the guys we've already talked about?
I think in general, yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can expect everybody to lose a handful of points, however many goals. The inclination is Erik Karlsson's in San Jose. They're unstoppable. They're going to score so many goals. But again, they were sort of probably close to the ceiling of what's possible for even a really great NHL team. So, and now they are sharing points with someone else. Someone else is getting in on those goals that they once had a freer path. A more of a right. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I was trying to get into the Declaration of Independence somehow, but I'm Canadian. I don't know the American one. Oh my gosh. Okay. For cover, Sharks, every player loses a few points thanks to Erik Karlsson's arrival. Perhaps Mark Edward Vlasic's shot on goal numbers also fall back down. That's the only other sort of ripple effect I can find amongst skaters. Last year, Vlasic had a career high 161 shots on goal, and now I imagine he's more likely to defer to Erik Karlsson while they're on the ice together. So that makes Vlasic probably fall further from the fringes of fantasy relevance, though he could have a really nice plus minus.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Vlasic is going to be a big part of the Sharks' success next year if they have it, and it's pretty amazing.
You said success.
Yeah, I did on purpose. No, I didn't. Okay, it would have been cool if I did.
I hope you can cut some of my disaster that I just went through.
I mean, if you were a really good friend, if you really were my best friend, you would have decided to take it over. But I guess you decided that it was too much of a hassle, and future Elon will deal with it. So
take what over? Oh, retake
the whole
it.
thing. Yeah, like if you know that it's going to be a disaster to edit, but that's okay.
I was trying to save you the trouble. I'll try and get through this.
Yeah, but clearly I'm going to have to cut it up. I'm going to have to cut it up. But I'll do my best.
No, you can keep it all. I'm ready to be embarrassed.
Okay, I don't want you to be embarrassed. It hurts both of us. Okay, where was I? All right. Yeah, I feel like Marc-Edouard Vlasic is going to be a big part of the Sharks' success next year if they're able to go far. Like, obviously, he's a great stay-at-home defenseman who's able to control play. And I feel like there's a really nice possibility of even strength. We haven't really gotten into even strength line combinations for the defenseman, like, well, who's going to be in the top six. But you could imagine a scenario where they've got Burns, Karlsson, or Vlasic on the ice at all times at even strength. That could be a really strong team. But yeah, I don't expect Vlasic to have much fantasy value for next year. Like, I guess aside from plus minus, like you said, Brian, which isn't really a stat that we care that much about. People are having a lot of fun in the chat room with your suggestion, trying to talk about the Declaration of Independence. We have Matthew saying 4 score and 75 Karlsson points ago.
But that's the Gettysburg Address.
I don't know. Who the F knows this stuff? Come on. We're Canadian, like you said, though maybe I'll have to become American because now I'm cheering for the San Jose Sharks. Cali, baby. I don't know. I'm losing it right now. So let's talk about the goaltender in Martin Jones. He's the next guy who a lot of people are asking us about. Does his fantasy value change now that the Sharks have just brought in this primo defenseman? And actually, before we get to Martin Jones, I just keep thinking about what you're saying about how you have to allocate these points and take away points from everyone because Karlsson's there. Like, I just don't really see it. Like Pavelski, Couture, Thornton, they're going to probably play the same amount of ice time. Some defenseman gets bumped, and now they play with a better defenseman. How can you say they're going to lose points? I feel like they're going to be able to continue to get points, maybe get more. But I know you're saying these goals have to come from somewhere, but I feel maybe it's just a matter of like one guy like losing some goals. Like
Jonas Donskoy gets 3 points next year.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Like, maybe, yeah, it's just like the bottom six. Everyone from there doesn't contribute that much. But I feel like, how can you say it's bad? Everything you're saying is logical, but at the same point, I just don't see how, like, oh, Joe Pavelski, from now, all the time that you were playing with Tim Heed, now you're going to be playing with Erik Karlsson, so you're going to not get as many points. Like, I guess you're just saying that now these goals, like, I guess we always talk about IPP, right? The percentage of goals that were scored while you were on the ice that you get a point of. I guess you're saying that Karlsson's going to have a high IPP, or whatever, have his IPP, and then guys like Pavelski now will go down. So like more goals might be scored while Pavelski's on the ice with the same number of goals, but now, you know, there's a good chance that Karlsson gets one of the assists and Pavelski doesn't instead. But I don't know. I just feel like it all probably is a wash. I'm not going to change any of these guys, actually. I'm only changing Karlsson, Burns, Hurdle, and I guess, who else did we decide? Vander Kane.
I'm not going to change all these guys, just 6 of them.
Yeah, but not like Pavelski, Couture, and Thornton. Not the ones whose situation don't change. Only the ones whose situation.
I officially did not change them on our projection sheet. I'm thinking about it, but I haven't yet.
All right, so if you bought the almanac and you have access to the projection sheet, definitely you'll have to check out that change log afterwards when we'll make our final decisions. But okay, I said I want to talk about Martin Jones. Sorry for everyone who's really excited about Martin Jones that I totally swerved away from him. But yeah, he's going to have, like we've said, 2 former Norris winners plus Marc-Edouard Vlasic on the back end. That's a good situation for a goalie to be in. They could theoretically have one of these guys on the ice at all time at even strength if they want. We had Jones all the way down in tier 4 after our Schmore Goalies Board episode, which quite a few people disagreed with even before the Erik Karlsson trade. I remember, Brian, you had a long back and forth with @PaulsKent58 on Twitter about, like, he was saying that you had Martin Jones way too low baseman's performances for last year. I don't know if you want to get into your reasoning. Basically, long story short, you said that last year he had like shorthanded save percentage, which is sometimes considered unsustainable. Things like that, reasons why you thought that Martin Jones wouldn't be able to keep it up. But as a reminder, we had guys like Quick, Dubnyk, Talbot, and Bishop in tier 3, and then Ranta, Allen, Jones, Rask, and Mike Smith in tier 4. At this point, it kind of seems like we'd be crazy to tell people to draft Cam Talbot over Martin Jones, right? Like, the Sharks are going to be so good, and Jones is going to benefit, unless you're really certain that Jones has a shaky position and Aaron Dell is going to take a spot. That would be a reason to have Jones lower. But aside from that, I feel like I would want to bump him up.
Yeah, I'm going to bump Martin Jones up too. I think that's fair. I can't remember my entire Twitter exchange. It's available on Twitter still if anyone wants to look for it. But the concern with Martin Jones before, when we were tiering our goalies, was that he could cede the net to Aaron Dell, with Martin Jones demonstrating himself to be a decidedly average NHL goalie, while Aaron Dell was showing better numbers in smaller sample, but also with untested upside that I kind of wanted to see. But with what amounts to 2 top defense pairings playing in front of him in San Jose now, Jones feels a lot more like a #1 goalie on an even better team than before. Any of Jones's shortcomings are going to be less consequential playing behind a team that could be so good. And I think that that team quality is going to help insulate him from his mess ups being too consistently glaring or catastrophic. The Sharks are going to help him get out of trouble more often than not. And that means that a turn to Aaron Dell isn't going to be warranted so quickly should Jones falter. It's kind of like our theory on Pecorine the last couple of years, how Nashville's so good that he's kind of protected in that #1 spot. Even if he is borderline, like losing his #1 job, they'll rescue him and make it all look okay. And if you want to go back further, how about guys, I'm just throwing this out here, like Dan Cloutier, Chris Osgood. I don't have the numbers for those guys in front of me, nor do I know whether their backups offhand were more or less capable as challengers than Aaron Dell. But the point remains that we're looking at a goalie who is going to be very well taken care of by the team in front of him. So bump Jones up. He's not going to be exposed so badly if he does play poorly. I will take him over someone like Cam Talbot now that I feel less concerned Jones is going to be exposed often enough to lose his #1 status.
I like it. I like this argument. I think it's very clever. It's like you before were worried that Dell could steal the job or steal some starts, but now that the defense is better, Jones is going to have an easier time, so then he won't look bad, so then they'll have no reason to let Aaron Dell take the job. Fascinating. Okay, I like it. So, Brian, in fact, because we're still talking about this Erik Karlsson trade, and we have a whole other team to discuss. Obviously, you did a big discussion at the top about the Ottawa Sens organization-wise, but we have a lot of players on the Senators who are obviously affected by Erik Karlsson moving. But before we get into that, since we're talking about goalies anyways, why don't we just take a little diversion and take like a sober look at our goalie tiers that we came up with at the end of Schmore Goalies Board. Because for those of you who don't recall us saying this, like we actually recorded Schmore Goalies Board not like a couple weeks ago when it was released, but like a couple weeks before that when we finished our almanac. And that was at the end of like a week long of intense recording all the time. I don't know if our brains were in the perfect place. So I think now is a good time to go through our goalie tiers with some new information that's come up during training camp and also just having had some time to really look at things, get some feedback from people, and let's see if we want to make any changes. What do you think, Brian?
Okay.
Well, you seem concerned.
Yeah, that's my hesitation. And I feel like we were in such an intense and devoted mind space. We originally tiered our goalies at the end of the almanac, and we had just been thinking hockey nonstop, 24/7, literally for a good couple weeks, it felt like. And so coming back to them now, I'm always good to reflect and review, but I just feel like, well, you go ahead and suggest your changes, but I wonder if we're going to forget, so to be quite frank, some of the rationales and justifications we had for putting these guys where we already did with like, again, being just entirely immersed in our hockey knowledge.
I hear you. Okay. Well, we don't have to make any changes. I just want to go through and see if it still feels right to you. And I'll let you know of any like things that are affecting me. But I promise I'm not going to argue with you at all. I'm just going to present to you what we have, any thoughts that I might or might not have. And then you'll just say if it's something you agree with or not. Even just if you could let our listeners know, even if you don't make any changes, I think the listeners would like to hear if something doesn't smell exactly right to you, even if you don't know exactly why. So let's go through it. Okay, very good. Very good sound effect here. We got high-tech stuff going on at Keeping Karlsson HQ. So and also the reason why I'm really thinking about goalies is I just did a draft yesterday. My first draft of the season was the Puck Hogs League. And I think and this league was crazy. Like, so many goalies were drafted so early. I guess just the way the points setup is set, like a goalie is super valuable if he's going to play a lot of games. Like, all the starting goalies were taken basically in the first couple of rounds. And it was really interesting to me to see where goalies were taken in comparison to our goalie tiers. Spoiler, I got John Gibson at the end of round 1, which I was pretty happy with considering how many goalies have been taken already. But we'll get to him in a little bit. So let's see who we have in our goalie tiers. So we've got Holtby, Anderson, Hellebuck, and Bobrovsky in our top tier. I'm going to tell you, Brian, right now, I'm happy with that. These were actually 4 of the first 6 goalies drafted in my draft yesterday, with the others being Vasilevsky and Rinne. And we went into detail on why we don't want to put those two guys, Vasilevsky and Rinne, in our top tier. Vasilevsky having struggled at times last season, not someone we could 100% rely upon, even though he's on an amazing team. And Rinne being a pending unrestricted free agent and having Saros breathing down his neck. So I'm still very happy with tier 1. I assume you are as well.
I was muted, sorry. Yeah, tier 1 still smells good to me.
Okay, so in tier 2, we had Gibson, Vasilevsky, Fleury, Matt Murray, and Rinne. And I'm also still good with tier 2 as well after having looked at it. And by the way, a side note, Anaheim has 52 off-day games next season. And what I mean by an off-day game is a game played on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Sunday. And keep in mind, most NHL, like the busiest days are Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And this is actually really high. Like the next highest is 42 off-day games. That's the next highest team. And most teams are actually in the 20s or 30s. So Anaheim like blows everyone away. And in my opinion, that's a reason to push Gibson up your draft lists by a little bit. Like I think that moves into the top of tier 2 for me. Like generally, most fantasy leagues, you could only start 2 goalies a night. So if you have 3 good goalies, you could really get hurt by it. Like there's not as much value in having that third goalie because there's going to be a lot of nights on a busy night of hockey where you're going to have to sit one of them even though he's playing, which is really annoying, right? Why are you wasting a roster spot on a good goalie that probably you could trade a lot for, that you could probably get a lot in a trade for, and you don't even need him because you're going to have to sit one of these guys. So trade one of these guys. But with Gibson playing on the off nights, you could theoretically have 3 starting goalies on your team, one of them Gibson, and get most of their games out of them. So there's a lot of value in gaming the schedule if you could get John Gibson as well as 2 other goalies, and you could still get a lot of those games. So that's a reason to be into John Gibson if you like him, which I do. Anyways, Brian, these 5 goalies, Gibson, Vasilevsky, Fleury, Murray, and Rinne, are you good with all 5 of these guys remaining in tier 2?
Yes, I am. Wow. I want to keep things just as they are. Big surprise.
I like it how it is. But now we get to tier 3. We have Quick, Dubnyk, Talbot, Bishop, and now Martin Jones. I feel as strongly as before that Quick and Dubnyk should move up to the second tier. Maybe I'm even more emboldened after seeing them ranked 5th and 6th in Scott Cullen's rankings, ahead of actually Bobrovsky, Gibson, Murray, Anderson, and Fleury. And Brian, I know you respect Scott Cullen a lot, so I was very interested to see that he had both Jonathan Quick and Devan Dubnyk higher than a lot of these goalies who we were lavishing with praise in our almanac. So I'm just throwing it out there. We don't have to do it, but I would be up for moving Quick and Dubnyk to join those other guys in tier 2. But if you want to leave them in tier 3, we could do that too.
Yeah, I wouldn't be okay with moving them up to tier 2. And it's not because I have a problem with the difference in quality of the goalies themselves. I think Quick and Dubnyk as individuals compare reasonably well enough with a lot of the goalies in tier 2, but it's the quality of their team that really differentiates them. And I guess you could say that John Gibson being on the Ducks and in tier 2, and the Ducks are closer to the Kings and Wild than they are in tier, and the Ducks are closer to the Kings and Wild who are represented in tier 3 than they are close to the Lightning, Penguins, Golden Knights, and Predators who are in tier 2. You can make that argument, but I like Gibson's chances to be an above average goaltender enough to put him up there in tier 2, despite his team quality not being quite as good. And those off nights that you were mentioning for Gibson really help. So that is why I'm going to happily leave Quick and Dubnyk in tier 3 with their own numbers and teams comparing better with Cam Talbot's Oilers and Ben Bishop's Stars. I think those are better overall comparisons. If anything, Elon, I wonder if we should be moving Martin Jones all the way up to tier 2 for the quality of his team playing in San Jose. Are the Sharks good enough? Are they close enough to the Lightning, Penguins, Golden Knights, and Predators to lift up what is expected to be an average on the whole goaltending performance from Martin Jones into tier 2 territory?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question because we have Vasilevsky there, who we've never seen him put up an amazing season. Overall, his numbers were better than Jones last year. I think all these guys we have in tier 2 had better numbers, aside from Matt Murray, actually, who had a very down year last year. But we decided to give him a break because he was dealing with injuries and other off-ice stuff. And he had been so good the couple years before, and the Penguins are such a good team. I mean, if you want to, but I'm okay to leave Jones in tier 3, actually. That would be quite a jump for a goalie that's never really had really above average save percentage.
So if Jones isn't going to tier 2, then absolutely I'm a no for Quick and Dubnyk as well.
All right, so we're leaving tier 3 the same. I know you're probably thinking, Elon, why are you wasting my time with this? I think the listeners tweeted us hashtag. What were your hashtags from before? Nobody remembers. But now you can say
rounded or team specific.
So now you could be like team rehash to let us know if you agree that we should rehash these goalie rankings just to make sure because people are going into their drafts and they really like to use our rankings and we want to make sure that we still stand by them.
I think team redux will work well.
Yeah, well,
it's because I already wrote the episode preview, and that's the wording I used.
Okay. So in tier 4 currently, we have no longer Martin Jones. So we have Ranta, Allen, Rask, and Mike Smith. So, Brian, just FYI, I'm not saying we have to change anything, but your suggestion of Tuukka Rask being in tier 4, that is like a very hot take. He was the 7th goalie taken in my PHL draft, and also Scott Cullen has him as his 7th ranked goalie, which would put Tuukka Rask in the same tier as guys like Quick, Dubnyk, Talbot, Ben Bishop. Like, I feel like saying that you'd rather have Ben Bishop over Tuukka Rask, to me, seems a little off, but at the same time, you justified it so well in the Boston chapter and also in Schmore Goalies Borg when you said that you feel like Rask actually is potentially at risk of losing his job or losing a lot of starts to Yaroslav Halak, who might even be a better goalie. So just one last chance, take a sniff, and if you're still happy with it, we'll leave Tuukka Rask in tier 4. Otherwise, we'll move on.
I like that you sucked up to me right at the end there, saying, I know we already thought this through so completely and perfectly, but what about now? And I am rethinking this one through. As you mentioned, I'm not penalizing Pekka Rinne much for the likelihood of being challenged by UC Saros, and the Bruins and Predators are comparable teams, but I still think Rinne compares a touch favorably to Rask at this point. He's still outperforming an average NHL goalie over the last 3 seasons, whereas Rask has not managed to do that. And as such, I'm less afraid of Rinne losing starts to Saros than I am Rask to Halak. Also, Halak is more established than Saros. I feel like he's a little more reliable. If he comes in and plays poorly a couple starts, he might have a little bit more leash to take over the job if Rask is really struggling. So if we're talking about moving Rask up a tier, he's on such a great team. So I guess let's say that balances out the fact that I have less faith in Rask on an individual level as a goalie than any of the other tier 3 inhabitants. For anyone who has lost the plot, those include Quick, Dubnyk, Talbot, and Bishop. And Jones, right? We just moved Jones there. So I can get with it. I can get with Rask moving up to tier 3, though I am sad if it means I have to give up my swing. Like, if you weren't asking me to move Rask, Elon, and if I was feeling stubborn, I'd be fine. Like, I would never even consider moving Rask. But it's also reasonable to think that Rask, like Jones, is pretty well insulated from the backup challenging because the team in front of him should help clean up several of the messes he might make. I really liked my tier 4 Tuukka Rask, but I will, as long as it's clear that I am acquiescing here, to move Rask up to tier 3.
Okay, Brian, guess what? You're still making a swing, okay? Tuukka Rask, like I said, was the 7th ranked goalie, both by Scott Cullen and in my draft I just did. So popular consensus is Rask is even better than tier 3. A lot of people would think of him as similar to Pekka Rinne. Like you said, we still have him below Pekka Rinne. I think you're doing the right thing here. This is a goalie who could potentially have the most wins of any goalie in the league. And like the advice is, like, it's fun for you to take a swing, but there are real life consequences to this. And you're telling people that they don't need to worry about grabbing, like, I don't know, like, I just feel like they're going to use these tiers, and you need to have Tuukka Rask in the right place and not let people expect that he's going to fall so far, or basically tell them you're not going to draft Tuukka Rask. Because if you have Tuukka Rask in tier 4, what you're really saying is don't draft him. You'd rather have Cam Talbot, which to me is like, come on, like, really similar.
Cam Talbot's not going to lose his job. I have more faith in Cam Talbot playing 65 games than I do Tuukka Rask.
Yeah, and who's going to have more wins if Tuukka Rask plays 55 and Talbot plays 65?
It might be about even.
Yeah. All right. So we've made the change. I think it's a good call. I'm sorry, Brian, if you're sad about it. You could change your mind by the end of the show, but you have to say it on the show. No, like, weird, like, putting it in the notes or something. Okay. The other guy I want to discuss that's currently in tier 4 is Jake Allen. This is the opposite. I want to know if you want to move him down. So Allen has been suffering from back spasms. He missed the start of training camp. The latest update from Roto-World is that he's expected to be back sooner on the ice than originally expected. So that's good. Maybe this is something we don't even need to worry about. But also, there's a goalie in the Blues organization that we didn't mention in the Almanac or on Smorgasbord, but he's been getting some buzz lately, and his name is Ville Husso. So, Brian, like, who is this Husso guy, and could he be someone that could challenge Chad Johnson for the backup spot to start the season, and maybe also someone that could pose a more formidable challenge to Jake Allen at some point during the year than we expected Johnson to? Like, I feel like we said Jake Allen, even though maybe he's not that great, St. Louis is such a good team, and also there's no chance that this Chad Johnson can challenge him for starts. He's freaking Chad Johnson. But now if you're going to tell me that Ville Husso is actually a good goalie, then that would kind of change everything. So who's this Husso guy, and do we need to worry about him? Also, do we need to worry about this Jack Allen, and also, do we need to worry about this Jake Allen back spasms issue and potentially move him down a tier?
Well, so I'm looking at our tier 4, and the teams represented there were Arizona with Ranta, Allen with St. Louis, Jones with San Jose, Rask with Boston, Smith with Calgary. And in the last 20 minutes, we've moved Martin Jones up out of that tier because he plays for San Jose. It's a really good team. We've moved Tuukka Rask up out of that tier because Boston is a good enough team to warrant it. And now here we are talking about Jake Allen, who I've liked a lot going into this year as an under-the-radar guy who's been left for dead by a lot of poolies, but still plays on what's likely to be one of the most competitive teams in the NHL this year.
Maybe let me just jump in. Like, just to be clear, all I want you to do is tell me if I need to think about Ville Husso or the back spasms. Like, otherwise, I was very happy to have him. Whereas I get that St. Louis is a really good team, but like, I'm just concerned about these little things. But I'm happy for you to just tell me, Elon, don't worry about it. It's cool. He's still the starter. There's also the fact that he was losing starts to Carter Hutton last year, which was concerning. Like,
okay, but I'm just trying to draw a line here between the movement we've seen out of tier 4, where Jones, Allens, and Rask probably all reasonably belong in a similar goaltending tier, and now you've got 2 guys gone and Allen's there alone, left for dead. Like, I feel like a lot of people have just given up on him.
So you're saying no, you're saying leave him in tier 4. You're not worried about Ville Husso and this back spasms thing, because I get worried about goalie injuries a little bit. Maybe you could tell me that that's too bad. We're going to talk about a couple other goalie injuries later on that are concerning me. Like, when I'm going into my fantasy draft, I want to make sure I've got a starting goalie that I can like rely on all season long. I don't want to hear about some like back spasms. I don't want to hear about new challenger in Ville Husso. And like, I know you're comparing Allen to Rask and Jones, and I know you say for both Rask and Jones, or you've said at different times that they are maybe going to potentially lose the job, or like they're vulnerable. But like, Jake Allen's the only one of the 3 who's actually lost the job for long stretches of time. First to Brian Elliott back in the day, and then last year to Carter Hutton. But okay, I'll let you speak. Whatever you say, I'm not going to argue with you.
So you said that I think we're not going to drop Allen out of tier 4, and if anything, if we're following the same logic we did for Rask and Jones, we're almost obliged to move him up. And I'm just going to remind everyone, Elon, you thought Rask's job as number 1 in Boston was over last season. There were times that we thought Jones was out too. Like, these guys have all faced challenges. Yes, Allen is the one who lost the job for the longest out of the group, but he's the only one who had a backup come in and actually play well enough long enough to actually steal the job. So I don't think that reflects on Jake Allen. I think it reflects more on the lightning in a bottle that Carter Hutton was able to catch versus Hudobin's not lasting quite as long and Dell's barely being there at all. So I'm saying logically, all the reasoning we've used to move Rask and Jones up, maybe we should be using, I'm not going to go there because I'm not trying to move our goalie tiers too much, but I still think they kind of all belong together. And if you're picking him as a tier 4 goalie, he should be at the top of tier 4. I like that St. Louis, you look at what they did, like if you want to get a signal for whether he's going to be challenged or not, they brought in Chad Johnson. That's not a number 2 goalie that's going to challenge for starts. I remember reading some quotes saying how confident the organization was and how happy they were to just give him the reins and see if he can take it. That said, if Allen does struggle, and even then, I think if he does, his leash is probably pretty long. But if Allen does struggle, then I do wonder, here we go, Elon, what you've been waiting for. If Ville Husso has at least as good a chance as Chad Johnson to take the helm or to play more games than Chad Johnson if there is a long period of time for which Allen is riding pine. Ville Husso was drafted right at the start of the 4th round back in 2014, just completed his 2nd season in North America, in which the 23-year-old put up a very nice .922 save percentage with AHL San Antonio. I don't think Husso is going to be the guy who gets the backup job out of camp. It seems more likely that his development path will be helped by playing more often in the minors than sitting on the bench while Jake Allen is sitting on the bench while the St. Louis Blues attempt to hand the reins over to Jake Allen. But if Allen does miss, if he can't hold those reins, or if Allen just sucks for extended period, But if Jake Allen does miss extended time or suck for an extended time and Chad Johnson isn't quite cutting it, it would be very fun to see what Husso can do. And I can't see Chad Johnson having a very long leash, seeing the way that last year went for St. Louis. They know, or I feel like they know every game is precious. So why not, if Chad Johnson isn't working out, throw Ville Husso in there, see if he gets it. But to go back to the start of my take, Jake Allen, I have faith that he's going to hold down this number 1 job for much of the year.
Okay. Because, another thing is, like, when we're comparing these 3 goalies, right, Jake Allen's the one who sucked last year for a lot of the year, as opposed to Jones and Rask, who were solid. I know you looked at underlying numbers in Schwargoli's boards. Okay. And as far as the back spasms, like, what do you think about my concern to draft a goalie who's having injury concerns? Like, if I have a draft tomorrow, you're laughing at me, but other people are having this thought. Like, Brian,
I'm not laughing. It's because you've had to bring it up 3 times because I keep forgetting to address it. And it is a legitimate concern. Bottom line, I'm not a doctor. Like, obviously everybody knows that. That's a facetious, cynical thing to say. But my take at this point of the preseason is, well, it's this point of the preseason. It's September 16th. We've still got a good 2-3 weeks before we actually hit the ice. And I'm more interested in seeing what happens the week before. If you're drafting today and you need to draft with knowing Jake Allen has back spasms, draft him, whatever. If anything, it takes him a week or 2. Like, that's the likeliest worst case scenario is that Jake Allen just doesn't start the season quite as early as the rest of the league, comes in a couple weeks. Of course, the absolute worst case scenario is he misses the entire season, but these are things that could happen for any goalie. I'd still be happy to take the same swing on Jake Allen in my draft tomorrow with back spasms as I would hope to take with a healthy Jake Allen a week out before the season.
Okay, that's all I wanted to hear, just to ease our concerns. You're saying don't worry about it. Worst case.
Do you agree, though?
I agree, sure, but I think this back spasm thing isn't too serious, but at the same time, it does make me nervous when I go into a draft. I might let someone else take him, but also at the same time, maybe that's a good opportunity. If everyone else is so concerned about these back spasms and he's falling too far, then you can be like, it's not going to be a big deal. Like, in my draft yesterday, Brian, this is not a goalie, but Patrice Bergeron was falling so far because he has injury concerns right now. I think it's back spasms also with him, if I remember correctly. But anyway, like, so fine, maybe I'll lose some time from Bergeron at the start of the year for the worst case, but this hasn't even been announced that Bergeron's going to miss time. He's just missing some preseason time. So I ended up getting really great value. So maybe I wasn't going to reach for him with this injury concern. And same with Jake Allen. But okay, we're saying leave him where he is. I'm with you. Now, here's where I think it gets really interesting. Because so far, I actually agree with pretty much everything you said. But now I've gone. Sorry?
What?
Now, I'm just going to take that again because I'm not sure if I did that well. So, okay, next we go to tier 5. I think it gets interesting here. I agree with everything so far. I think we're doing a great job. Hope you're having a good time. Hope you listeners are having a good time coming on this ride with me. This was my idea, and you can let me know if you thought it was a bad idea. But we're in tier 5. We've currently got Lundqvist, Elliott, Price, and Crawford. Then tier 6 has Varlamov, Luongo, and Schneider. And then tier 7B, we split up tier 7. So we have some backups in tier 7A. But tier 7B has Hutton, Anderson, and Markstrom, and Howard, actually, as the worst starters left. So just to repeat that again, Lundqvist, Elliott, Price, Crawford in 5, then Varlamov, Luongo, Schneider in 6, and then Hutton, Anderson, Markstrom, Howard in 7. And Brian, I think there's a few things we have to look at here. First of all, more injury stuff. This Corey Crawford news, it isn't great. I saw a tweet from Charlie Rumeloidis, who's a beat writer in Chicago. I hope I pronounced his name right. And he said, Corey Crawford reveals that he was dealing with a concussion last season. And he's quoted as saying, "Things have been progressing, but right now I'm not ready to go yet." And, this is not back spasms hoping to be back in a week. He's still not ready to go. Concussions can be serious. You never know how long they're going to take. In my draft yesterday, I had the decision between Crawford and Luongo for my second goalie, and my gut told me to go against our tiers. Because like I said, we have Crawford in tier 5 and Luongo in tier 6. And I said, no, I'm going to go for Luongo because he's healthy. And also, even looking beyond the health issue, Luongo's maybe at risk to lose some starts, but Crawford has this injury concern. And also Chicago is not a good team, and Florida looks like they're going to be a really good team. So yeah, I remember last year, we thought Carey Price, don't worry, Carey Price, he's such a good goalie, even though it looks like Montreal's going to be a train wreck and they have no defense, Carey Price will figure it out. And now we have Corey Crawford. Even if he does play, he might still have some lingering effects. He might have some rust. Plus, this Chicago defense looks a lot to me like the Montreal defense looked last year. So I wonder if we're walking right into a Montreal Canadiens scenario this year with Corey Crawford. So I just feel like Corey Crawford is too high. I think he's on a bad team and he has injury concerns. I know he's been a good goalie for a while, but if I learned one thing from our disaster of last year's projections, it's that it's not enough for me. I feel like if you're on a really bad team, then you can't be someone you rely on in fantasy. And I think his great save percentage that he's been putting up for so long is at risk, just like Carey Price turned out to be.
Okay, so your proposal is?
To move Crawford down.
Okay, and that would put him alongside Varlamov, Luongo, and Schneider.
Yeah, exactly. Because I was deciding between Luongo and Crawford, and I took Luongo, but I'm not saying maybe someone could make an argument for Crawford, but I feel like the fact that I had to think about it means that they're more in the same tier, unless you think that I made the wrong call, or unless you think that, something is wrong with me. But that was my experience, and that experience tells me that those guys are in the same tier, if not Luongo higher, since I did end up choosing Luongo. So you could tell me I made a dumb choice.
No, I'm not going to tell you that. I think it makes sense. I'd rather the guy who's going to for sure start the season in a better team situation in Luongo than Crawford, who's got a cloudy injury situation and is going to be playing for what's likely to be not a very good team in Chicago. So right now we have Crawford alongside Lundqvist, Elliott, and Price, and you're wondering if he's closer to Varlamov, Luongo, and Schneider, who are three guys that we had sort of grouped together as players who are going to start the year for their team, but then might be in trouble before long, whether it's because of injury or a backup challenging. It still feels a little soon to move Corey Crawford anywhere. I want to see where he's at. Again, like Alan, when we're a week away from opening night, but if you're drafting now, he's saying he's not ready to go yet. And there's been so much cloudiness in any of his injury return timelines going back to last year. And so, yeah, Crawford does belong with Luongo, Varlamov, and Schneider as a player who could miss somewhat significant time or see it starts getting into see it starts being eaten into for one reason or another.
Okay, so good. We agree. That was fun. Yeah, I feel like they're similar, right? We're worried about Luongo getting injured. I'm not even worried too much about Reimer stealing the job from Luongo, unless Luongo really falls off. Luongo's been the starting goalie for a couple of years. I'm just more worried about him getting injured and then maybe struggling when he comes back. And I feel like it's similar with Crawford at this point. I'm worried about him getting injured and also with the team situation. I think they belong together. So good. Next goalie that I want to talk about is Corey Schneider, also dealing with health issues. Apparently, he's dealing with a hip injury that bothered him all last season. News came out at the end of the season that he was bothered all all last season. It's still bothering him. Here's a tweet from Mike Morial quoting Schneider from Thursday. Schneider said, "Hard to pinpoint a time when I could return. Right now, I'm more focused on the immediacy of feeling better every step, every stage, and doing the last things I need to do to feel game ready. Hopefully, it'll be sooner than later." So not as bad as Corey Crawford saying, like, I have no idea. He's saying he's working on it. He's trying to get better. He actually did go to practice yesterday, though he didn't finish the practice. But clearly, Corey Schneider is like on the mend and might be fine. But at the same time, like I'm really concerned, like, because he sucked last year. We saw that he was dealing with this hip injury. He's still dealing with it now. So it's not as if he had this injury and then he had some surgery which fixed it up and now he's like a new man. Like, this is a guy who's still dealing with it in training camp. So I feel like he's going to continue to deal with it probably throughout the season. And if last season was any indication, Corey Schneider sucks now. He's not good. Like, unless you tell me that his health situation is vastly improved, I have no reason to expect him to be turning himself around and becoming a good goalie. And he's got Keith Kinkaid breathing down his neck, like more so than Carter Hutton. Like, Keith Kinkaid stole the job for so long, like for basically the whole second half of the season. So I feel like at this point, it doesn't feel right to me. It's the sniff test, right? Like, if I'm choosing between like Schneider or Luongo or Varlamov, I feel like Schneider is in a whole other tier. Like, I'd rather put Schneider down with like the worst goalies that you'd want to have that could be a starter. Like, I want to move Schneider down. It's basically what I'm saying. Like, actually, oh, sorry, let me just say, because I forgot that thing. Like, actually, I kind of feel like Schneider might belong more. Like, we have this tier 8A with Greiss, Leonard, Scott Darling, and Mrazek. So it's sort of like 4 goalies on 2 teams where we don't know who the starter is going to be. And I feel like at this point, like, I feel that way about Schneider and I forgot his name now. Schneider and Kinkaid. Like, while we did the Almanac, we were saying, well, Schneider took the job over in the playoffs, so it's probably his job to start the year, so it's not as much of an unknown. But now with this injury, I really feel like it's pretty much 50-50 if he'll get starts. That's why I want to move him down. But if you want to tell me I'm overreacting to this injury news, just like I was with Jake Allen, or I wasn't really, but just I wanted to get your opinion, then we can leave him there. What do you think about Corey Schneider now that we've heard that his hip is still bothering him?
So if it weren't for this injury news, would you have changed your mind?
No, I liked it where it was. It's this hip thing. It's driving me crazy.
So I can't get too invested. The fact that it's out in the open a few weeks ahead of time means, you know, players are just coming back from summer or whatever. They were working out beforehand, getting into game shape. I feel like some stuff is going to happen. It doesn't feel like something that usually happens. Like, I don't feel like we're often talking about starting goalies like Allen and Schneider having back spasms and hip problems. And of course, Corey Schneider does have some injury history, but I am not going to say that this is enough yet for Corey Schneider to be moved down with guys like Greiss, Leonard, Mrazek, and Darling. And that's because I still expect him to be opening night starter. I don't think he's quite being challenged by Kinkaid. I don't think he's quite being challenged enough by Kinkaid to have that spot up for grabs. Last year's situation in New Jersey where Kinkaid took over late and then Schneider took the net back mid-playoff series and then played well before the Devils were bounced reminds me kind of the Andrew Hammond, Craig Anderson Sens scenario back in 2014-15, where a similar thing played out. Hammond took the job, helped the team make the playoffs. By the time the Sens turned back to Anderson in the playoffs after Hammond didn't play so well in the first couple games, Anderson was great, but it was too late to avoid getting bounced by the Habs. So the difference there, of course, was that Craig Anderson gave up his job because he was hurt initially, and Corey Schneider gave up his job because, well, it was a mix of injury and inconsistent play, and there could have been a chicken and egg scenario there too. Look, I'm not optimistic about Corey Schneider this year. In our almanac, I piled on him as being a terribly unreliable starter. And if he was named Carter Hutton, I probably would have piled on him even more. Like, he still has some name value to me as a guy whose upside we know has been so good. But I think those days are behind him. And what we just want from him is to be a reasonably close to league average while not blowing starts left and right for you. I'm going to keep him where he is. Ask me again in a week, though. Like, if I'm drafting today, I'm drafting him the same way, maybe at the bottom of his tier, but still not quite as far down as the Laner, Greiss, Mrazek, and Darling types.
Interesting. Okay, so I guess we can leave. And I was actually suggesting to go down 2 tiers, right? Like, we have tier 6 with Varlamov, Luongo, Crawford, and Schneider. Tier 7 has Hutton, Anderson, Markstrom, and Howard. Then it's tier 8 where we have these guys, Greiss, Leonard, Darling, and Mrazek. So the last one I want to bring up to you is, we don't have to talk about it actually that much. Like, Carter Hutton, To me, it feels like it's weird that he's there with Anderson, Markstrom, and Howard as like the worst of the worst for sure starters, just because you've got Ottawa, Vancouver, and Detroit. Like you just ranted about how terrible Ottawa's going to be. You've got Vancouver and Detroit just like as bad. And then we have Buffalo, a team on the rise. A lot of people think they might be able to challenge for the playoffs. Even if you don't think they're going to make the playoffs, I still feel like they're going to be a team that's going to be able to get some wins. They've got Eichel, they've got Dahlin, they brought in Skinner, they've got Ristolainen, they got Sam Reinhart, like Casey Middlestat's coming in. Like I feel like this is a team that people are excited about, and it seems odd to me that we have Corey Schneider, for example, in a tier above Carter Hutton. So the last thing I'll suggest to you is, do we maybe move Carter Hutton up? Like if there was news that the Sabres were expecting Linus Ullmark to be a serious challenger, then that would be different. But at this point, like we haven't really heard that. Like they saying that Carter Hutton's come in and he's going to be the guy next year, and then eventually over time, Linus Ullmark will take the net.
Yeah, so I think where you and I principally disagree is how good a team Buffalo is going to be this year. I feel pretty confident saying Buffalo is going to be around the same place as the bottom teams like Ottawa, Vancouver, Detroit, Montreal. I don't think they're significantly better than any of those teams, to the point that I want their goalie a whole lot more. Again, I think you have... No, sorry. Let me just figure out how to wrap that up, because my last 2 points don't really apply now. So I'm leaving Hutton where he is. And I know you call him the sure starter, Elon, but if it wasn't for Jake Allen's injury or Corey Schneider's injury, those guys would be just as sure starters as Carter Hutton. And at this point, I expect them both to be healthy. So I'm not willing to say, yeah, Carter Hutton is such a sure starter on a good enough team that he deserves to be moved up. I think Buffalo is going to struggle more than you think this year.
Okay, wow. But like the same as Ottawa, Vancouver, and Detroit. Like we'll leave him there if you want, but I just feel like Buffalo is going to take a step forward. If I recall, Dom said on our podcast yesterday that all of his number crunching told him that he thought Buffalo was going to be a lot better next year. And that's why he was trying to tell us that people won't be mad at him. Wait, what was it? What was the player that we were saying he had? Oh, yeah. So people won't be mad at him when he has Casey Middlestat ranked low, because he was saying that overall he thinks Buffalo is going to be good. But all right, let's leave him and see. I think that Carter Hutton would be a steal to get him where you haven't projected around Craig Anderson. Like in my draft yesterday, which was definitely a reach, I agree. Carter Hutton was drafted like so high above Carey Price. By the way, so what a world where Carter Hutton's drafted higher than Carey Price. But I think that Buffalo is going to win more games than Montreal. You disagree?
No, I don't say I disagree. I just don't say I don't think they're better enough to warrant Carter Hutton moving up. Like Buffalo's a bottom 10 team next year.
Okay, a couple more things with goalies before we move on. Brian, this has been a long show, so I don't think we're going to do our Yahoo rankings this year. We'll have to save that this year. I don't think we're going to do our Yahoo rankings.
Well, we can. Don't say that.
Well, we still have the whole Ottawa impact of the trade to get through.
I don't have a whole lot.
All right, fine. So let's keep going. Okay, Brian, a couple more quick things to talk about with goalies before we move on. So first of all, Robin Lehner had a story written about him in The Athletic where he talked about his drug addiction and bipolar diagnosis, both things that we didn't know about or I didn't know about before reading this. It was really powerful stuff. I'd recommend people check it out. As far as fantasy-wise now, or like just NHL-wise, Robin Lehner obviously was signed by the Islanders. We assumed he was going to challenge Thomas Greiss for starts. After knowing that he's been struggling with all these issues and he's apparently better now, does that change your opinion of him and your projection of whether or not he's going to be able to take the number one job on the Islanders?
I'm here. It doesn't really affect how I think of him. But first off, it was an incredible article. And from what I know, it was unlocked on The Athletic. So you can go read it for free, even if you're not a subscriber. And I highly suggest it is a window into how like these professional hockey players in high pressure, high intensity situations are not being adequately supported by NHL teams in some ways, although Lehner had very positive things to say about the NHL's program and by Sabres GM and about Sabres GM Jason Botterill. But he also mentioned how there was a team that pretty much just piled on him saying, how can you possibly be a good teammate with all these problems you're dealing with? And you know, when someone's going through a problem, that's probably not the best thing to do, especially Lehner's situation sounded very extreme with high stakes. And so it's disconcerting, although unfortunately not surprising to see that sort of thing happening in the league. And hopefully it helps shed some light. A very brave thing of Robin Lehner to do to share that, because he had nothing to gain from putting that all out there, and a lot to lose. And of course, now we're all going to look at his performance this season through that lens of, oh, you know, this guy has this whole story that carries a stigma with it. How is that affecting? So I kind of I don't feel totally comfortable weighing in on the fantasy implications of Robin Lehner's mental health. But I guess if I had to offer a take, it would be that I wonder if we've really seen like a clean and sober Robin Lehner play goalie, or how often we've seen that, and a Robin Lehner that feels good. And so I don't know how that will affect his game, not having the same habits and addictions that he once had. There's just, again, you could probably sense my discomfort in trying to figure this out. I don't think it changes anything. I think if Robin Lehner can play well, then he's going to have a good shot at getting starts. If he doesn't play well, he won't. I think it's just about as simple as that. And trying to come to any conclusion about the sort of things he offered and shared with everyone in that article is probably not taking seriously enough the effects of mental health. Is that fair? I
think that's fair. I think let's put it this way. We're going to give him a clean slate for next year and see how he does. And, so when you're projecting him for next year, maybe you don't want to take so much into account how he did the last couple of years. Let's see how he does. He's got a chance for the job. Tomas Greiss is definitely, it's not Tomas. I just want to call everyone Tomas now. We'll see how he does. Tomas Greiss clearly isn't like this. Tomas Greiss clearly doesn't have a stronghold on that job, so Lehner has a shot, like you said. Okay, one other thing I wanted to say about goalies, I just want to throw it out there because a couple of people mentioned it to me, oh, how could you not mention Carter Hart on Sport Goalies Board? So I just want to say that the Philadelphia Flyers have a really good, high pedigree prospect named Carter Hart, who is going to probably start the season in the minors. They've got Elliott and Neuwirth, but as we know, Elliott and Neuwirth will likely both, or at least one of them will get injured. And I could see a scenario, maybe it's Stoli the goalie who gets called up, or Alex Lyon, but there's a scenario potentially where Carter Hart could get called up, especially if the Phillies starting goalie is injured long-term. And maybe Hart could take the job like Hellebuck did over Michael Hutchinson did a few years back in Winnipeg when Pavlik went down. So I don't know, if you're in one of those types of leagues where you could, I don't know, put a guy in an NA spot if they're not on your team. I don't know what type of situation you're in, but I see a scenario where Carter Hart could be a sneaky goalie at some point this season if he gets called up. If he gets called up for Philly for whatever reason, grab him. Don't assume he's going to get called up and be a backup. But we'll talk about it a lot on the show when we get to him. I'm good to move on from goalies. How about you, Brian?
I am as well. I'm just thinking Cam Ward. Do we need to move him up? If we're thinking, just keep him in mind, at least at the end of your draft. If you drafted Corey Crawford and no one else drafts Cam Ward, throw Crawford in IR, grab Cam Ward right away so that you can be ready in case Cam Ward does get significant time starting. And I'm also just going to, I know you wanted all these goalie thoughts to be quick, but when you bring up these ideas, I have opinions. And I don't agree with your Philadelphia take. I think if Brian Elliott goes down, Mikhail Neuwirth is still a pretty good goalie when he's healthy. I think you're a year ahead of schedule with Carter Hart.
Maybe you're right. A name I wanted people to know. And regarding Cam Ward, the thing is he's going to be so bad. If Cam Ward's the starter, look at what Anton Forsberg did last year for Chicago. It was terrible.
Yeah. So you're getting someone who's going to get you starts, right? He's going to get saves if those count in your league. He'll get you a win here or there, but if you're going to get dinged for goals against, then he might not be worth the trouble.
And also I could see Cam Ward losing the job to Anton Forsberg, or them fighting for starts. Cam Ward is not the guy that...
I'm not going to go that far. What did Anton Forsberg do last year to earn another shot?
Well, Cam Ward's not going to play every game. So if he has a bad game, it's the same what happened in Carolina, right? Cam Ward, if he goes on a good run, he'll play. If he has a bad game, you play the other goalie, then he'll play until he does badly. I just don't know if Cam Ward, you could ever call him a sure thing to hold a job, especially on such a, I don't like this Chicago team. Maybe I'll be wrong about this take, but their defense looks so weak. Like I said, we have Duncan Keith, we have Eric Gustafsson, who might be a good sleeper, and no one really else. Seabrook's still there, I guess. Or whatever version of Brent Seabrook still exists. Brian, we still didn't talk about the Ottawa Senators side of the Karlsson trade. We really went down this road of goalies. I hope people enjoyed it, but let's now talk about what happens with the Ottawa Senators now that they lose their top power play and elite defenseman. Clearly, the obvious beneficiary is Thomas Chabot, who we've got to imagine is now going to be the top power play defenseman, right? And so you put him down for 35 points. I put him down for 40 points in the almanac. I feel like we were both assuming, or at least I know I was assuming that Karlsson would leave at some point. So I was building in some extra points to assume that. But now that Karlsson's gone for the whole season, do we need to change Thomas Chabot's projection? Does he become a good sleeper for next year as a potential top power play defenseman? We don't know who's going to be there on that top power play with him. If Duchesne and Stone are there, that'd be pretty good. Who knows how long they'll last, since they're unrestricted free agents and they're going to be rebuilding, and Ottawa could easily trade them anytime.
Yeah, so I'll also add some points for Thomas Chabot. He's going to be running a top power play that still has Matt Duchesne and Mark Stone. And I guess the other two guys are Bobby Ryan Dzingel, Brady Tkachuk, some mix of those three. But 40 points seems like a comfortable floor now for Thomas Chabot, now that he's likely going to be a top power play quarterback. I'd love to give him a few more, but I have grave concerns over how successful a Chabot-CC pairing is going to be at ever getting the puck out of their own zone at even strength.
I'm good to say that Chabot can get 40, but to give him a 40-point floor is insane.
Insane is going a little far, don't you think?
Like, I mean, a 40-point floor, like Justin Falk was the top power play defenseman on Carolina last year, and he had 30-something points. Like, definitely just being the top power play defenseman, especially on a team like the Sens, no way there's like guaranteed at least 40 points. You don't even have to think about it. Like, I think that you and I might have a different opinion of what the word floor means. Like, I think that would be a very nice season for him. But also,
I think we came to an understanding on the almanac of what the word floor means. So, okay, so maybe it's a little rich, 35-point floor, but I think 40 is a lot likelier now than it was before. And I would be drafting him as a guy who I think he could get 40. I guess I'm confident he can get to 40. Is that less insane? I'm backing off to appease you.
No, I mean, I agree. I have it projected for 40 also. Just to say a 40-point floor to me means that like you're 100% certain or 95% certain that he's going to get 40 at least. And that seems crazy to me. I could see him easily getting 30, right? Like, he's never done anything before. We don't even know if he'll hold the job all season. He's Thomas Chabot.
Yeah, but Thomas Chabot is pretty good from what we've seen. Like, he was getting on the fringe of fantasy relevance already into this year, and at times last year, just with some small performances he had while Erik Karlsson was still in the lineup.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page here. Maybe we're just arguing about semantics here. I think Thomas Chabot is someone to look at deep in your drafts, but don't expect him to be like a guarantee, for sure, especially because Duchesne and Stone will be gone, and who knows if this team will be able to score some goals. But now let's talk about Duchesne and Mark Stone. So we put Matt Duchesne for 65 and Mark Stone for 70 points in our almanac. Those definitely seem high now to me, now that Erik Karlsson is out of the picture. And they really are the only two players, aside from maybe Chabot, who I could imagine having some fantasy relevance on the team. Do you want to make any changes to Duchesne and Stone now that they don't have Erik Karlsson feeding them the puck?
Yeah, when you lose an elite power play quarterback, you're going to lose power play goals. And Chabot has upside in that role, but he's still a rookie learning the ropes and is sure to look pretty green at times early on. So it could be a rough start to the year as everyone settles into their new role on a power play that can't just be like, okay, give it to Erik and he'll figure something out. They are missing the heart of that offense and power play. So I'm going to take both Duchesne and Stone down to the low 60s, just because who is there in Ottawa to help get the puck out of their zone and to help have controlled entries into the offensive zone? It's honestly going to be very hard for any Ottawa Senator to break 65 points without 65.
Yeah. Oh, good one. David saying in the chat room, stay away from both. I will point out that, like I said, both Matt Duchesne and Mark Stone are going to be unrestricted free agents at the end of the year. And as Brian said, Ottawa has now admitted they're in a rebuild. I don't think they're signing these guys to long-term contracts. I'd love to see them do it, but I just don't see it happening, which means they could get traded. And all of a sudden, they could both be very valuable in their new situations. So I would definitely not stay away from them. I think there's some value in Ottawa as like the guys on the team, plus upside. But also, you know, a couple years ago, I really got burned because I was holding Matt Duchesne in a league where he was still on Colorado and not getting good deployment. I was really hoping he would get traded at the trade deadline, and it didn't happen. And I really should have dropped him like a long time before because he was doing nothing on the Avs that year. But okay, so you're dropping them both to the low 60s. I agree with you. So, Brian, Chris Tierney comes in, and I feel like he might have an impact, or as much of an impact as someone can have on this team that's not Duchesne or Stone, because we have news that J.G. Pajot suffered a torn Achilles tendon. He's expected to miss at least 6 months. I think Pajot was the guy who was projected to be the second-line center, or maybe Tierney was going to challenge him for that spot. Like I said, Tierney was the third line center on the Sharks last year. Now, got to imagine Tierney is in the top 6 next year, centering the second line. Maybe they even give him Mark Stone to play with him. Probably not. But I don't know. Maybe they want to split Duchesne and Stone and somewhat spread around the offense. But either way, a top 6 player that maybe even gets a chance at some power play time can't be completely fantasy irrelevant, right? So I feel like we have to at least put a number down for Chris Tierney as opposed to before when we didn't even mention him in the almanac.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we could. I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith that Chris Tierney is going to be able to find himself in a fantasy relevant position. It's not like Peugeot, now that he's out, opens up this spot where big offensive numbers can be produced. And Tierney is not even the heir apparent to that second line center position. Zach Smith could still end up as the second line center, or even Logan Brown for that matter. And again, anyone as second line center in Ottawa is not likely to be flanked by greatness. Maybe you get Mark Stone if you're able to, if the Sens split their lines. But if not, the best you're looking at is someone like Bobby Ryan or Brady Tkachuk. And for a player who doesn't have a whole lot of skill to start with, I'm not that interested. Like Bobby Ryan is probably the cutoff for fantasy relevance the cutoff for fantasy relevant Ottawa Senators. And I see Chris Tierney being below that.
That's fair, but I think one more guy we need to talk about before we close the book on this Erik Karlsson trade is the guy you talked about right at the start in your rant, the guy being paraded around as the new future superstar of the Ottawa Senators. We actually didn't even mention him in the almanac, or at least we didn't put a projection for him, Brady Tkachuk himself. I think we got to put down a number now. The Sens are doing everything in their power to convince their fans that the future is bright, and a lot of it is because they have this future superstar, Brady Tkachuk. So I feel like he's probably going to make the team, right? And I imagine if he makes the team, they're going to put him in the top 6. They're probably going to give him significant power play time. Is there any chance that the 19-year-old can be fantasy relevant next year?
The plan seemed to be for Tkachuk to play in London after leaving college, but you're right that now it's seeming more and more likely Tkachuk is going to be on the roster opening night. I'm not optimistic for how much he's going to be able to accomplish, both as a rookie right out of his draft year and as a member of the Ottawa Senators. So 40 points?
40 points. Like, this is a pace, right? So you're saying of the games he'll play, he's going to put up like basically half point per game?
That's my thought, yeah.
I'll go 45. I'll be generous. I just feel like the opportunity will be there. It'll be hard not to at least get a point every couple of games, so I'll give him 45. But yeah.
I like Shabbat more than Tkachuk. How about that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, especially because D are so scarce, especially a top power play defenseman, and especially someone with a 40-point floor, which I don't think he has. But yeah, a defenseman who could get you 40 points, including a bunch on the power play, like a whole other tier, for sure. But yeah, Brady Tkachuk, if you're in a super deep league, even in a one-year league, don't forget about him because he might be one of the few, significant power play getters that are available at a really late point in your draft. Okay, Brian, what do you want to do here?
You want to just trade names without getting into it? If
you want. Okay.
Or you want to just leave it?
Let's do it. But no edits. We're going to do this all one take.
Okay.
Okay, Brian. We still had a plan. This has been a long show, but hey, it's the preseason. We got to give people what they want to hear. We had this plan where we were going to go through some players and look at their average draft positions on Yahoo and give our opinions of which players are maybe getting drafted a bit too high or a bit too low. So then when you go into your drafts, you could maybe see that some of these players might be good sleepers or maybe people that you want to avoid because they're going too high. So I always find this a very useful exercise before I go into a draft to get a sense of where people are getting drafted, who I could earmark to maybe wait a little bit for, but maybe not wait too much for because I know they're going to fall, but I really do want to get them. So I've got the Yahoo rankings up in front of me and I've come up with some players. And how about I just go down the list, and then as we go down, maybe I'll throw a name, you'll throw a name, we'll throw some names out. No super deep analyses, but we'll give you guys some names that jumped out at me as either being ranked too high or too low in the Yahoo ADPs.
Let's do it.
All right, so I'm going down. I gotta admit, at the start of this thing, a lot of the players seem to be drafted pretty well. Like I'd say in the top 100 or so, I didn't have any really big surprise. I was like, oh my God, this guy's in the top 100. He sucks. Like obviously there's William Karlsson, who we've talked about so many times on the podcast. He's been drafted average around 62nd overall. I think that's high, but also we've already discussed him a bunch. So you guys know what we think. Obviously I see why he's getting drafted so high because he had that amazing year last year. We don't think he's going to repeat it. I assume there's nothing to say about William Karlsson. The next guy who I was actually really surprised to be being drafted so high, especially because he hasn't really done anything to earn it, is Aaron Ekblad. He has an ADP of 101, and the defensemen that have been drafted after him are like Keith Yandel, Morgan Riley, Ryan Ellis, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Provorov. Like, that's crazy to me. Like, Aaron Ekblad, let someone else take him if people are still into him. Like, he had 38 points last year. His career high is 39 points in his rookie season. He's played 4 years now. I don't see a big breakout coming. We talked about in the Florida chapter of the Almanac that Keith Yandel is great. Like, I think he had a very underrated 56 points last year. Like, no one's talking about Yandel, but definitely grab Yandel ahead of Ekblad, right?
Yeah, for sure. You want the top power play quarterback, and that's who it's going to be.
Yeah,
and Yandel's pretty good at the job too. For anyone thinking Ekblad is still an up-and-comer, ready to snap up that prime deployment, not counting on it.
Yeah, definitely. Like, Yandel's very good, and also this Florida team, like, so many stars on that top power play, and that even strength also. Like, Florida's gonna score a lot of goals. I really like Keith Yandel. Ekblad could be decent, but drafted way too high. Okay, then there's a couple other guys that I came through that I just know that, Brian, you would have on your list, right? There's Yanni Gourde, TJ Oshie, both at 120 and 125. We've already gone in depth on why you think those guys aren't going to keep it up. So do you want to say anything about either of them?
No. Can I share some of my own guys?
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
Okay. I saw Nick. What number are you at, Elon, in ADP?
I'm around 120, 125. That's where I had Gourde and Oshie. I'll just throw it out there. You said that you think Yanni Gourde, limited deployment, so it's hard to expect him to repeat it. And TJ Oshie, just like you're saying that, and TJ Oshie, you just hate TJ Oshie, right?
No, that's your way to. You do this just to wind me up. Okay. Yeah, Gourde, lightning in a bottle last year, no pun intended, and not going to continue. Even if his deployment sort of improves, I'd be surprised if he was able to get up quite as high again. Okay, my guys who I thought were a little high, Nick Ehlers, up at 57 points. Great for shots. Maybe that's a reason why. But
wait, can you say it again? He's not at 57 points, right? 57 ADP.
Oh, right. At 57th average draft pick
Can you
position.
Go from Nick Ehlers? Sorry.
Nick Ehlers, he is being drafted on average 57th pick overall. And maybe it's his shots on goal that people covet, but he's being drafted ahead of guys who are top power play, like Mikko Rantanen and Sebastian Aho. And then I've got a string of defensemen who maybe were ranked appropriately amongst defensemen, or maybe not. You've got Letang at 79, Karlsson at 84, Barry at 93. You have Rasmus Dahlin ahead of Rasmus Ristolainen, which I disagree for this next season. And I know, Elon, you and I might have a difference of opinion on that. Cam Atkinson is kind of buried down at 122nd overall. And then one guy, like one of the lowest defensemen that I saw, the lowest fantasy relevant defenseman, Kevin Shattenkirk, is tucked away at 139th pick overall behind guys like Jake Gardner, Brandon Montour, Nick Leddy, and Will Butcher. I think he's incredible value there if you're getting him that late.
Yeah, I had Shattenkirk marked down as well. Like, yeah, that's pretty wild that people would rather have like Jake Muzzin or like Nick Leddy over Shattenkirk. He's often someone we've referenced. Shattenkirk. He's often someone we've referenced as one of the top power play defensemen in the league. His first season with the Rangers didn't go as planned. Of course, he started with 18 points in 25 games, which was great, but then he fell off completely in December and ended up having a season cut short after undergoing surgery. So his overall numbers look bad, but it's clearly he was dealing with injury issues, and then he missed the season. Now everyone forgets about him, but we're looking at a guy who put up 55 plus point paces with the Blues, mostly padded with points on the power play. And I feel like people are downgrading the Rangers a bit too much. Like, yeah, they're in a bit of a rebuild, but at the same time, he'll be on a power play with like Zibanejad, Kreider, Zuccarello, Buchnevich. Like, he's going to have good guys playing with him. I think I agree with you for sure. Shattenkirk is great value being drafted so late, like at 139th overall. Do you want me to throw a couple names at you now, Brian?
Yeah, but let me get this one out of the way first, just so I'm totally caught up. Duncan Keith down at 189. I don't know if you see him as good value at that point, but I think he's great value there. And for some reason, Evgeny Dadonov at 128, just behind Cam Atkinson. So I'm out of the 120s, Elon. You catch up to me, and I'll get you around the 163 mark.
Okay, well, I feel like Jaden Schwartz and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins are in the 140s, and that seems very low to me. Schwartz had 59 points in 62 games last year. It's almost a point per game. He could be a steal. considering he's been taken in these drafts, apparently, after guys like Zucker, Taves, Yanni Gourde, Riley Smith, like I would take Jaden Schwartz over any of those guys that I just mentioned. The lines coming out of St. Louis so far, and I don't know how much stock you want to put into like first day of preseason lines, but they were apparently going with Ryan O'Reilly, Tarasenko, and Maroon, and then Perron, Shen, and Schwartz. So that's a pretty good line for Jaden Schwartz to land on, even if he doesn't play with Tarasenko, and he might, and plus he'd still be there with him on the top power play. And then Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, he missed some time last year with a cracked rib, but when he returned in March, he put up 17 points in his final 16 games after he got put on the top line and top power play with McDavid. And McDavid was quoted in the summer saying he'd like to see some consistency on his line. McDavid wants it. Give it to him. Let him play with RNH and let RNH get to like potentially 70 points. So I really think you've got great value there. I would rather have Schwartz and Ryan H over a lot of the guys being taken before them. Then you already mentioned Shattenkirk. Also Ryan O'Reilly at 155. That's a steal to me. I feel like he's like a 65, 70 point guy next year, likely to play with Tarasenko on the top line and the top power play. He's getting drafted among the likes of Kevin Fiala and Derek Brassard and Kadri, who's probably a third liner now, and Corey Perry. Like, give me Ryan O'Reilly well above those guys.
Yep, agreed. Just below Ryan O'Reilly, I've got Brendan Gallagher, who's being picked on average at 163rd, behind guys like Steen Krejci, Tom Wilson, Jakob Silfverberg, and then Kyle Palmieri right there with Gallagher behind all those guys, and Patrick Maroon. And then behind all those guys, you've got Mark Stone at 165. Before Karlsson was traded, I had Stone as someone who could hit 70. I still think he's a really good hockey player, as are Anders Lee and Matt Duchene, who are right around the same mark. So right when you're getting past the 160, and you have Gallagher, Palmieri, Stone, Anders Lee, Matt Duchene, and then Jordan Eberle just a little bit behind, you can really win your draft right there.
Yeah, actually, in my draft yesterday, I got Anders Lee and Brendan Gallagher super late with really late picks. Unfortunately, plus minuses counted. I feel like they're both getting a little bit dinged for that, especially someone like Gallagher. But this league, it's a points league, and there's also points for hits, and Gallagher gives you some of those. So does Anders Lee, actually. So that can make up for potentially some plus minus hits. I actually have some guys before that I wanted to bring up. Nico Hischier and Sam Reinhart, both at around 158. I feel like both have huge upsides as they're slated to play with their team superstars. Hischier with Hall and Sam Reinhart with Eichel, of course. Hischier, he had 52 points last season as a 19-year-old. News out of training camp. I know, Brian, you love these so much. He's apparently bulked up. He's gained 8 pounds.
What?
So, I mean, that's good, right? Like, in a good way. Like,
that's like actually more of a reasonable take than a lot of these best shape of my life. But it's also expected. These are young guys. Like, Hishier's still a teenager. Of course, he's going to be filling out his frame more than ever before. But good for him for putting in the time and dietary restrictions on himself or whatever he needed to do to make that happen.
Yeah, he ate some protein, Mom. He went to the gym and he lifted. And I think that he's going to build on that 52-point rookie season. I could expect him to hit 60 next year. I wouldn't be surprised at all. Maybe even a little bit higher, depending on how good Taylor Hall can be if he could keep it up from last year. Then we've got Sam Reinhart. 50 points overall last year, but he had that huge breakout in the second half. Now he has Jeff Skinner on his line, potentially, along with Evander Kane. So I feel like there's a lot of upside for Reinhardt, and I would be taking him above some of the guys being taken ahead of him. How about JT Miller at around 162? Brian, normally I know you don't like recommending drafting guys due to expected line mates, but I feel like Miller might be like the one exception in the league. He might be the one But I feel like JT Miller might be the one exception in the league. Like, he was already like a solid 50-point guy on the Rangers, so it's not like he was nobody before he got to the Lightning. But when he got to the Lightning, he had 18 points in his final 19 games of the season as a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning. 6 power play points. He was on the top power play as well. So there could be huge value there. Who knows if he stays there the whole time? If anything, I'd like to draft him. Hope he has a really hot start and then sell high. I love that move. That's what people should have done for Nemesnikov last year. But anyway, Miller at 162, I think he's going to have a really strong start to the year if he's still playing with Kucherov and Stamkos, and I don't see why he won't be.
Yeah, no, I'm high on JT Miller. I don't know why you said you're right. It's not always wise to pick a player who is going to be irrelevant if they're bumped off their top line, and you need to be careful about at what point in the draft you use those picks. But JT Miller, pretty good guy to go for in that situation. Elon, I've got about 6 names left of players who are not even being drafted, who are available in free agency. Are you there yet in your list?
No, not yet. So how about I'll say a few more?
Okay.
Okay, so you already said Gallagher and Palmieri. I want to throw Nolan Patrick there. He's also been around them, around the 160s. I really like Nolan Patrick for next year if he's going to be centering a line with like JVR and Voracek. You can't get much better. And we're talking about these guys being drafted around like the Hurdles, Okposos, Connor Sherrys. So Gallagher, Patrick, Palmieri, obviously. You already mentioned Mark Stone. Also Matt Duchene right along with him at around 165. We like both of them to be better than that, especially if they get traded, I think, at this point. What about Alex Edler going at 165 in a bangers league? Like, don't forget about Alex Edler. He had a great end to last season. He's great for hits. He's great for blocks. I'd be concerned about that plus minus, obviously, if you have to worry about that, but we don't like to promote leagues counting plus minus. But I really like Alex Edler for as long as he could stay healthy as the right now de facto top power play defenseman on Vancouver. Hopefully he can keep up what he did last year. Then we have Mika Zibanejad at 169. He had a head injury today, apparently in practice, which is concerning, but still like such great value for a guy that's a top line, top power play centerman. I could see him easily putting up a 60-point pace, and I think he has upside for more. I'd love to see him put together a full healthy season.
Me too.
Unfortunately, these head injuries in training camp, it's crazy. Be careful. Be careful out there, everybody.
Oh, yeah, okay. You wanted me to... Yeah, it's ridiculous. No hitting. That's my new thing.
No hitting at all. Or
no hitting in hockey within 10 years.
Oh, my God.
Why?
No hitting at all?
Yeah. I mean, if players cannot avoid each other's heads, it's not worth it.
Well, you could maybe come up with other solutions, like maybe just like super bad penalty, like, you know, really long suspension, try to make them not do it. Like right now, I think it's really
weird. You could have an immediate, like automatic 10-game suspension for any contact with the head. And that would, I think, get rid of it pretty quickly. Then you'd still have matters of interpretation. I would love to see them crack down and get really serious about it. But the time to do that was probably at least 3 years ago. And so I'm starting to lose faith that's going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a whole debate for another podcast, probably not even a Keeping Karlsson podcast, but it's definitely a really important issue right now. But we're talking fantasy here. I love getting great defensemen. I don't know why I said that in like one word sprints. Okay. I love when you could find a defenseman that you could draft super late and get good value. So you mentioned Duncan Keith, who could still be the top power play guy. Here's two guys I like even better than Duncan Keith for next year. Jared Spurgeon and Oscar Klefbom, both being drafted around 170. Both guys who I think could be great value. Like everyone's written off Spurgeon. I feel like Matt Dumba's the new hotness. Spurgeon had the same point pace as Dumba last year. He was just injured at the end of the year. It could easily just be Ryan Suter and Spurgeon on the top line and top power play again, just like most of last year, and Dumba falls off. But even if not, like even if Dumba does what everyone's expecting, I still feel like Spurgeon could be great. And also he's great for blocks. Then Oscar Klefbom, we talked about him last week with Dom. So far slated to be the top power play defenseman on Edmonton. There's some concerns, but at 170, that's a really good value pick. Also, don't forget about Zach Parise, who's been going at 174. He had a strong finish to last season. For what it's worth, he says he's feeling great. Brian, is this one of the best shape of your life? I don't think he said best shape of your life. I think for Zach Parise, it's just nice to hear him say he's not injured at all and like not hurting somewhere. I feel like he's always probably hurting somewhere usually. Yeah,
Zach Parise saying he got out of bed this morning is a great report on Zach Parise. So yes, I like him as valuable. So yes, I like him as being a valuable guy, as a healthy player.
Okay, he is. And then one more I'll throw out at you. Past 190. So this is the reason why you don't need to rush to grab centers early. Like why wash early? Like why rush for Jonathan Toews when you could get a similar upside Derek Stepan like 5 rounds later? Because that's how far back Derek Stepan is being drafted, which is crazy. Like, I feel like Stepan is going to get between 55 and 60 points. He does it every year. And I feel like he might even have upside to do a little better than he usually does, because next year he's got Clayton Keller and Alex Galchenyuk. Like, he's got some really good players around him. I really like what can happen with him. And I'll mention another guy in his line who is a little more, not as good as Derek Stepan, but don't forget about Richard Panik, by the way. He's been mostly undrafted, which makes sense. He's Richard Panik. He's not a big deal, but he ended last year on the top line and top power play. He had 15 points in 20 games to end last season. He also helps in hits. So in your bangers leagues, don't forget about Richard Panik. So Brian, give me the rest of yours, and then I'll throw just 2 more.
Okay, and before I do that, Elon, make sure to add, this is a great list you're compiling. Make sure to add it to our show notes.
I'll do it. They're
not in there, but the show notes are there for all patrons after every episode, keepingkarlsson.com/patron. If you're having trouble keeping up. Okay. Yeah, my guys passed the 180 draft pick mark who are unranked in terms of ADP on Yahoo. I picked out 6 before I got tired of looking. Kyler Yamamoto, Andrei Burakovsky, Andreas Athanasiou, Richard Panik, who you just said, Thomas Chabot, and Samuel Girard as your D. Unfortunately, there didn't seem to be a whole lot of defensemen who went undrafted who were fantasy relevant. So you just might want to make sure you take care of your decor and not think it's something you're going to work out later.
Yeah, like that's the thing. When you're drafting, people realize kind of late, like, oh shoot, I need defensemen. So if you could grab defensemen a little bit earlier than them, then you'll have your pick of some pretty good forwards. Like I said, I got Gallagher and Anders Lee super late in my draft because earlier on I went and grabbed, I think it was like Spurgeon and Clefbaum, who were the guys I just mentioned, or maybe it was Spurgeon and someone else, but Edler. But like I like some of these defensemen who you could grab maybe not as late as everyone else, and then you'll find some good forwards. Like, trust me, there'll be some good forwards there. Brian, I also had Andreas Athanasiou as a guy to look at. Unfortunately, Henrik Zetterberg, word is he's done in the NHL. He's had a great career. We should probably give him a more proper send-off at some point. That's not really our job, right? But he was great, and word is Athanasiou might become the new second-line center. So just like I was saying about Chris Tierney, but I feel like it's a much better situation because well, I don't know. Actually, both not great teams. But anyways, a top 6 spot is a top 6 spot. And don't forget about Athanasiou. One guy who actually was ranked, but really low is Jake DeBrusk at 171. He could be a steal. If he gets on the top power play on Boston, which indications are he definitely can. You can listen to our Boston chapter of the Almanac as we went into reasons why and who he's competing with. So yeah, Jake DeBrusk could be a really good sleeper. He's one of my other big sleepers for the year.
Cool.
All right, we did it. A marathon episode. We broke down their Karlsson trade. We revisited our goalies. We looked at some Yahoo ADPs. And with that, we're going to thank you all for listening as we head forward into next season. If you want to support the show, if you like what you heard, first of all, this almanac we've been talking about, it's still available. It's still for sale. keepingkarlsson.com/almanac. Over 27 hours of content. So if you want more, you could marathon this thing, listen at 1.5 speed if you need to, and we covered every single fantasy relevant player, and you get access to this projection sheet, which we've been changing as recently as this episode, as we've been talking about these players. Another thing you can do to support the show is become a patron of Keeping Karlsson. And one of the perks of becoming a patron of the show, and this is like for $5 a month. This is nothing. And you can get entrance potentially into the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League. So the sign-up deadline has passed, but we're opening up a wait list. And if we get enough to fill another division, then we will be able to open it up. And even if we don't, then you'll be on the wait list and be able to take over from some teams that maybe go inactive during the season. But I think we'll be able to fill another division. We just need like 5 or 6 more people. So if you are interested and you're sad that you missed the sign-up deadline, it's not too late. So anyways, you can just go to keepingkarlsson.com/patron. You'll find all the information. You can send us any questions that you have on Twitter at keepingkarlsson. We'll get back to you shortly. But okay, with that, we are going to end the show. So thanks everyone for listening. And Brian, let's cue the outro music. And why don't you read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast with a still relevant name was researched with help. No, it was presented by Dobber Hockey and supported by our keepingkarlsson.com/patrons. It was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Pool, Dobber Prospects, Corsica, Natural Stat Trick, Charting Hockey, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, Roto World, Fantrax, and Yahoo.
Great job, as always, Brian. And we will talk to you all again next week about, I don't know, we'll see what's happening in training camp next week, and we'll put together an episode.
Until then, don't be a dummy, and keep on keeping Karlsson.
Woo! Wow, what a long one. Hope I'll be able to get this out tonight.
Good luck.
Oh my God.
Although I feel like there were fewer edit points than...
Yeah, maybe at the end we struggled a bit, but whatever. I'll do what I gotta do. Brian, you're great.
Good job.
So, as far as next steps of things we have to do, I'll throw out hi everyone in the chat room, by the way. Thanks for joining us. You're still here. You can hear our little quick back chat. I don't know if you saw, Brian. Everyone signed up for the cupful, so we're good there. The leagues are created. I also got in every division someone to agree to be a commissioner, so that's done. So I think the only thing, for the draft, to like pause and stuff if they need to. I think the last thing we need to do is maybe an email in like a week, being like, it's 1 week to go. Make sure to go to your draft and to, just a reminder. So aside from that, I think there's nothing left to do for the cupful, which I'm very happy about.
Okay. So email, what would be the date? Is that before the draft you want to send it?
I'm like a week before the draft, or maybe at some point around that time.
So say about September 23rd, 1 week till drafts.
Yeah. And then aside from that, I think we're good. Oh yeah, I need to find someone to co-host the that show with me, the live auction draft. So
I think from the ideas we were throwing about, I think you'll.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, Thanks everyone again for joining. Hope you liked the show. Oh, we never said rate us and review us on iTunes. Oh well.
And you know what? People did not. The comments, the iTunes reviews did not come.
You know what, Brian? Rob C did a contest on one of his podcasts, and he was like, everyone who reviews me on iTunes this month. This wasn't like recently, but at some point he was like, everyone who leaves me an iTunes review this month is going to be entered into a draw to like win something. So we could definitely do that.
But how do you get the info?
It's like, I think the person has to like first give the review on iTunes and then like email and be like, hey, I gave the review on iTunes.
Right.
And we'd have to
then how do you know it was the same person?
Well, I guess you'd have to trust them. I don't know. Like we would see that it's a new review. We would only allow one entry per review. So I guess if you want to just troll, like watch the reviews as they come in and then jump on one, then I guess you could probably game the system. But I don't know. I don't think we're going to be setting a $10,000 prize. So I don't know who's going to be doing probably like a t-shirt.
I would do anything for a t-shirt.
Okay. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.